Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Foundation. The sun cast long shadows across the suburban street as Detective Ray Holloway pulled into his driveway, the familiar crunch of gravel beneath his tires marking the end of another grueling day. At 42, Ray had seen enough darkness in his 15 years with the force to know that evil often wore familiar faces. What he hadn't expected was to find it wearing his wife's face. Ray had built his life on principles as solid as the oak trees that lined Maple Street. Born to a single mother who cleaned offices at night to keep food on the table, he'd learned early that respect was earned through action, not words. His military service in Afghanistan had taught him patience and precision, qualities that served him well both as a detective and as a father to his two children. The house before him was a testament to those principles. Every board of the wraparound porch had been measured twice and cut once. Every flower bed had been planned and planted with care. This wasn't just a house. It was his fortress, his sanctuary, the place where he'd promised to protect his family from the world's cruelties. His 15-year-old son, Danny, inherited Ray's methodical nature, but channeled it into woodworking rather than law enforcement. The boy had spent countless hours in the garage workshop Ray had built, learning to shape wood with the same precision his father used to shape investigations. Danny's latest project had consumed 3 weeks of after-school time and weekend hours, a treehouse for his 8-year-old sister Lily's birthday. Ray remembered the pride in Danny's voice when he described his plans. It's going to have a rope ladder, Dad, and a pulley system for bringing stuff up. I even designed a little window box where Lily can plant flowers. The boy had shown Ray detailed sketches, measurements calculated to the quarter inch. It was the kind of project that would have made Ray's own father proud, if he'd known the man. As Ray approached his front door, he expected to find the usual evening chaos. Lily's homework spread across the kitchen table, Danny's tools cleaned and organized in the garage, and his wife Brenda probably on her phone, as she'd been more frequently lately. Instead, he found something that made his blood run cold. In the backyard, where Danny's treehouse should have stood proudly in the old maple tree, lay a pile of splintered wood and broken dreams. The structure had been systematically dismantled, each board sawed apart with deliberate precision. This wasn't an accident or a storm's damage. This was intentional destruction. Brenda stood beside the wreckage, still holding the handsaw that had been Ray's father-in-law's. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, and her green eyes held a coldness Ray had never seen before. At 38, she maintained the appearance that had first caught his attention at a police charity fundraiser 12 years ago. But something fundamental had changed beneath the surface. Brenda, what the hell happened here? Ray's voice carried the controlled fury of a man trained to remain calm under pressure. She turned to face him, and for a moment, Ray saw something flicker across her expression. Not guilt or remorse, but something closer to satisfaction. Our son needs to grow up, Ray. This will humble him. The words hit Ray like a physical blow. He looked at the destruction again, seeing not just broken wood, but the destruction of his son's trust, his pride, his birthday surprise for his little sister. 3 weeks of work, countless hours of planning and building, reduced to kindling by his own mother. Where's Danny? Ray's question came out as barely more than a whisper. In his room. He's been up there since he saw what I did. Brenda's tone was matter-of-fact, as if she'd simply cleaned out a closet rather than destroyed a labor of love. Ray felt something shift inside him, a cold calculation replacing the initial shock. This wasn't the woman he'd married, the one who used to brag about Danny's projects to her friends. This was someone else entirely, someone who could look at her son's heartbreak and call it necessary. Why? The single word carried the weight of their entire marriage. Brenda's response chilled him to the bone. Because he's becoming too much like you, Ray. Too focused on building things, too interested in making others happy. He needs to learn that the world doesn't care about his feelings. Ray studied his wife's face, applying the same analytical skills he used on suspects. The micro-expressions, the body language, the way she avoided direct eye contact. Everything pointed to deception. But deception about what? As he climbed the stairs to check on Danny, Ray's mind was already working, processing the scene like a crime. The systematic destruction spoke of planning, not impulse. The timing, right before Lily's birthday, when the impact would be most devastating, suggested calculation. And Brenda's explanation felt rehearsed, like she prepared for this confrontation. Danny's door was closed, but Ray could hear the muffled sounds of his son's grief. He knocked softly. "Danny? It's Dad." The door opened to reveal a boy who looked like he'd aged years in a single afternoon. Danny's eyes were red-rimmed, and his hands still bore the calluses from 3 weeks of woodworking. "She destroyed it, Dad. 3 weeks of work, and she just tore it all down." Danny's voice cracked with the weight of his heartbreak. Ray pulled his son into a fierce hug, feeling the boy's shoulders shake with suppressed sobs. "I know, son. I know. I don't understand why she did it. I was so careful with everything. I double-checked all the measurements, used the techniques you taught me. It was going to be perfect for Lily's birthday." Ray held his son tighter, his mind racing. Something was wrong here, something deeper than a mother's misguided attempt at life lessons. The Brenda he'd married would never have done this. She'd been proud of Danny's projects, had even helped him with some of his earlier builds. "Dad!" Danny pulled back, looking up at his father with eyes that held too much hurt for a 15-year-old. "What's going to happen now?" Ray met his son's gaze with steady resolve. "Now, we're going to find out what's really going on, and then we're going to fix it." That night, after Danny had finally fallen asleep and Lily was tucked safely in her bed, Ray sat in his study, staring at the case files spread across his desk. But his mind wasn't on the robbery case he was supposed to be reviewing. Instead, he was thinking about the expression on Brenda's face when she'd explained her actions. He'd seen that look before, on the faces of suspects who believed they were smarter than the detective questioning them. It was the look of someone who thought they'd covered their tracks perfectly. Ray opened his laptop and began typing, his fingers finding the keys with the same methodical precision he applied to everything else. If Brenda thought she could destroy his son's trust and his family's peace without consequences, she was about to learn just how wrong she could be. The investigation would start tomorrow. Tonight he would plan. Chapter 2. The Investigation. The next morning arrived with the artificial normalcy of a family breakfast table, but Ray could feel the tension crackling beneath the surface like electricity before a storm. Lily, still blissfully unaware of the treehouse's destruction, chattered excitedly about her upcoming birthday party while pushing scrambled eggs around her plate. Danny sat in sullen silence, his usual appetite replaced by the hollow look of someone whose faith had been shattered. Brenda moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, packing lunches and refilling coffee cups as if nothing had changed. But Ray noticed the subtle tells, the way she avoided eye contact with Danny, the slight tremor in her hands when she thought no one was looking, the phone that never left her side. "Lily, sweetheart, why don't you go get your backpack?" Ray suggested, his voice carrying the gentle authority that had always worked with his daughter. As Lily skipped out of the room, Ray studied his wife's reflection in the kitchen window. Brenda was texting someone, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. When she noticed Ray watching, she quickly pocketed the phone. "Work emergency," she explained, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Ray nodded, filing the information away. Brenda worked as a real estate agent, a job that required her to be available to clients, but she'd never been secretive about her communications before. Another piece of the puzzle. After dropping the kids at school, Ray made his first stop at the office of Detective Lisa Chun, his partner for the past 3 years. Lisa was 10 years his junior, but had twice his street smarts when it came to reading people. She looked up from her computer as he entered their shared workspace. "You look like hell, Holloway." "Bad night." Ray poured himself coffee from the perpetually brewing pot that sustained the detective division. "Lisa, I need a favor." "Off the books." Her eyebrows rose. Lisa had worked with Ray long enough to know he didn't ask for favors lightly. "What kind of favor?" "I need you to run a background check on my wife." The words hung in the air between them like a confession. Lisa's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "Ray, what's going on?" He told her about the treehouse, about Brenda's cold explanation, about the way everything felt wrong. Lisa listened without interruption, her detective instincts engaged. Could be a mental health issue, she suggested carefully. Postpartum depression can manifest years later, especially with stress triggers. Ray shook his head. This felt calculated, Lisa, like she wanted to hurt Danny specifically. Okay, but why are you asking me to run a background check? You've been married to her for 12 years. You know her background. Do I? Ray pulled out his phone and showed Lisa a screenshot he'd taken of Brenda's recent call log. She's been getting calls from a number I don't recognize, multiple times a day for the past month. Lisa studied the screen, her expression growing more serious. Ray, are you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes the answers we find aren't the ones we wanted. Ray thought about Danny's broken expression, about Lily's upcoming birthday party, about the systematic destruction of something beautiful his son had created. I'm sure. Lisa's fingers flew across her keyboard. Within minutes, she had pulled up Brenda's information, employment records, financial history, social media activity. Most of it was exactly what Ray expected, but there were gaps, inconsistencies that made his detective instincts tingle. Ray, look at this. Lisa pointed to a series of cash deposits in Brenda's personal account. These started about 6 weeks ago. Small amounts, but regular. And they don't match her real estate commission schedule. Ray studied the financial records. Brenda had always been meticulous about money, a trait born from growing up in a family that struggled financially. But these deposits suggested income she hadn't disclosed. There's something else, Lisa continued, pulling up another screen. That phone number you showed me? It's registered to a Trevor Kowalski. He's 34, works in construction, and has a record. Ray felt his stomach drop. What kind of record? Domestic violence. 2 convictions, 1 dismissed on a technicality. Most recent was 18 months ago. The room seemed to spin around Ray. This wasn't just about infidelity. Brenda was involved with someone who had a history of violence. The thought of this man anywhere near his children made Ray's blood run cold. I need everything you can find on this Trevor Kowalski, Ray said, his voice deadly calm. Lisa hesitated. Ray, I know what you're thinking, but you can't handle this like a case. This is your family. No, Ray corrected, his eyes hard as steel. This is exactly like a case. Someone is threatening my family, and I'm going to find out who and why. The rest of the morning was spent building a profile on Trevor Kowalski. He was a construction worker who specialized in home renovations, which explained how he might have met Brenda through her real estate work. He had a history of relationships that ended badly, often with restraining orders involved. He lived in a rundown apartment complex on the wrong side of town and drove a beat-up pickup truck that had been reported stolen twice, but never prosecuted. By lunch, Ray had Trevor's address, his work schedule, and a list of places he frequented. He also had something else, a growing certainty that the treehouse destruction was part of something larger. Ray, I've got to ask, Lisa said as they reviewed the information. What are you planning to do with all this? Ray looked at his partner, a woman who had become one of his closest friends over the years. I'm going to protect my family. And if Brenda is having an affair? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Ray had been married to Brenda for 12 years, had built a life with her, had trusted her with his children's welfare. The thought of betrayal cut deep, but it was the thought of his children being exposed to danger that made his hands clench into fists. Then she's made her choice, Ray said quietly. And I'll make mine. That afternoon, Ray parked across the street from Trevor's apartment complex. The building was a 3-story structure that had seen better decades, with cracked paint and broken windows patched with cardboard. Trevor's truck was in the parking lot, which meant he was home. Ray settled in to wait, his patience honed by years of surveillance work. He didn't have to wait long. At 3:47 p.m., Brenda's car pulled into the parking lot. Ray watched his wife of 12 years step out of her sedan, look around nervously, and then walk quickly to the building's entrance. She had a key. The sight of his wife entering another man's apartment with her own key hit Ray like a physical blow. This wasn't a recent development. Brenda had been seeing Trevor long enough to have a key to his place. The timeline suddenly made sense. The cash deposits, the secretive phone calls, the sudden change in her behavior toward Danny, it all pointed to a relationship that had been going on for months, possibly longer. Ray sat in his car for 2 hours, watching the building, his mind working through the implications. When Brenda finally emerged, her hair was disheveled and her clothes wrinkled. She looked around the parking lot again before getting in her car, but she didn't see Ray parked in the shadow of an overpass. As he followed her car at a distance, Ray's phone buzzed with a text from Danny. "Dad, when will you be home? I want to talk about the treehouse." Ray's jaw tightened. His son was still processing the destruction of his project, still looking for answers that made sense. Meanwhile, his mother was betraying their family with a man who had a history of violence. The drive home gave Ray time to think, to plan. By the time he pulled into his driveway, he had made a decision that would change everything. He wouldn't confront Brenda directly. Instead, he would give her exactly what she seemed to want, a chance to reveal her true nature completely. That evening, Ray sat with Danny in the garage workshop, surrounded by the tools and materials that had been meant for future projects. "Dad, why did Mom really destroy the treehouse?" Danny asked, running his fingers over a piece of sandpaper. Ray looked at his son, this boy who had inherited his methodical nature and his desire to build rather than destroy. "Sometimes, son, people change. And sometimes we have to accept that the people we thought we knew were never who we believed them to be." Danny nodded slowly, understanding more than Ray wished he had to. "What are we going to do?" Ray put his hand on his son's shoulder, feeling the weight of responsibility and the cold edge of determination. "We're going to find out the truth. All of it. And then we're going to decide what kind of family we want to be." That night, after everyone was asleep, Ray sat in his study and began making a list. Names, dates, financial records, phone numbers, everything he would need to uncover the full extent of Brenda's betrayal. He had spent 15 years learning how to investigate crimes and bring criminals to justice. Now he would apply those same skills to his own life. And when he was done, everyone involved would understand that Detective Ray Holloway was not a man who forgave betrayal, especially when it threatened his children. The investigation was just beginning. Chapter 3. The Setup. 2 weeks of methodical surveillance had given Ray a complete picture of his wife's double life, and the clarity was both devastating and liberating. Brenda had been seeing Trevor Kowalski for 4 months, meeting him 3 times a week at his apartment, while supposedly showing houses to clients. More damning, she had been taking Danny and Lily to McDonald's on Fridays, then leaving them in the car while she went upstairs to Trevor's apartment for 20-minute encounters that she timed to the minute. The thought of his children sitting in a car in that dangerous neighborhood while their mother betrayed their family made something cold and hard settle in Ray's chest. This wasn't just adultery, it was child endangerment. And Ray had documented every instance. Lisa had continued helping with the unofficial investigation, though she'd grown increasingly concerned about Ray's mental state. "You've been different these past 2 weeks, she observed as they sat in their squad car during a routine patrol. "Colder, more focused. It's like you're planning something." Ray kept his eyes on the street ahead. "I'm planning to protect my family. From what I've seen, your family is already broken, partner. The question is what you're going to do about it." Ray's phone buzzed with a text from Brenda. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." He showed the message to Lisa, who checked her watch. "It's 4:30 in the afternoon. Kind of early to be working late, isn't it?" Ray started the engine. "Want to take a drive?" They parked outside Trevor's apartment complex, just as Brenda's car pulled into the lot. Today was different, though. Instead of going straight to the building, Brenda waited in her car. After 5 minutes, Trevor emerged from the building and approached her vehicle. Ray watched through binoculars as they had what appeared to be an intense conversation. "Body language says they're arguing," Lisa observed, studying the scene through her own binoculars. "She's gesturing a lot, and he's leaning away from her." The argument continued for 10 minutes before Trevor threw up his hands and walked back to the building. Brenda sat in her car for another 5 minutes before driving away. She didn't go upstairs. "Trouble in paradise," Lisa murmured. "You think she's trying to break it off?" Ray lowered his binoculars. "I think she's trying to manage the situation. But she doesn't know that I know." That evening, Ray implemented the first phase of his plan. He arrived home at his usual time, greeted his children with genuine warmth, and acted like nothing had changed. At dinner, he even complimented Brenda on the pot roast, the same recipe she'd been making for years. "How was your day?" he asked, his tone casual and loving. Brenda looked up from her plate. Her fork paused midway to her mouth. Good. Busy. Showed 3 houses to a couple from Phoenix. Ray nodded, filing away the lie. That's great, honey. Any chance of sale? Maybe. They're thinking it over. After dinner, Ray helped Danny with his homework while Brenda gave Lily a bath. The domestic normalcy felt surreal, like acting in a play where only he knew the script. When Brenda's phone buzzed with a text, Ray noticed how quickly she grabbed it and how she angled the screen away from him. Everything okay? He asked. Just a client with questions about one of the properties. Another lie. Ray had seen the contact name, Trevor. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Ray sat on the edge of the bed and watched Brenda apply her nightly moisturizer. She'd been doing this routine for 12 years, but now Ray noticed things he'd overlooked before. The way she avoided his eyes in the mirror, the slight tremor in her hands, the phone that never left her nightstand. Brenda, he said softly, is everything okay between us? She froze, her hand holding the moisturizer bottle. What do you mean? You seem distant lately. Distracted. I just want to make sure we're okay. She turned to face him, and for a moment, Ray saw something flicker across her expression. Guilt, fear, or maybe hope that he would give her an easy way out. We're fine, Ray. I'm just tired. Work has been stressful. Ray nodded and pulled her into a gentle embrace. I love you, Brenda. You know that, right? I love you, and I trust you completely. He felt her stiffen in his arms. I love you too, she whispered, but the words sounded hollow. The next morning, Ray put the second phase of his plan into motion. He called in a personal day and, after dropping the kids at school, drove to the office of a private investigator he'd worked with on several cases. Mike Torres was a former cop who specialized in domestic investigations, and he owed Ray a favor from a case that had gone sideways 2 years earlier. Ray Holloway, Mike said, looking up from his desk with genuine pleasure. What brings you to my little corner of paradise? Ray sat down across from Mike's cluttered desk. I need help with a personal matter. Mike's expression grew serious. What kind of personal matter? Ray laid out the entire situation. The treehouse, the surveillance, the evidence of Brenda's affair. Mike listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes on a legal pad. So what do you need from me? Mike asked when Ray finished. I need you to approach Trevor Kowalski. Tell him you're a friend of Brenda's, that you're concerned about her marriage, and that you want to help her leave her husband. See what he tells you. Mike raised an eyebrow. You want me to pose as Brenda's ally? I want to know how deep this goes. How long they've been planning this. Whether they've discussed my children, my job, my finances. I want to know if they're just having an affair or if they're planning something more. Mike studied Ray's face. And what are you planning to do with that information? Ray met his gaze steadily. I'm planning to protect my family. Ray, you're a good cop and a good man. Don't let this situation turn you into something you're not. Ray stood up, his decision made. Maybe who I am isn't who I need to be anymore. 3 days later, Mike called with his report. He'd met with Trevor at a bar near the construction site where he worked. Trevor had been eager to talk, especially after Mike bought him several drinks. Ray, you're not going to like what I found out, Mike said over the phone. Tell me. Trevor says Brenda's been complaining about you for months, calling you controlling, saying you don't appreciate her, claiming you're more interested in your job than your family. He also says she's been asking him to be patient while she figures out how to leave you. Ray felt the familiar cold calculation settling over him. What else? She's been telling him that she's afraid of you, that you have a temper, that you've threatened her. She's been building a case for why she needs to leave and possibly why she might need a restraining order. The words hit Ray like a physical blow. Brenda wasn't just having an affair. She was laying the groundwork to paint him as an abusive husband. With his job in law enforcement, such accusations could destroy his career and his custody rights. There's more, Mike continued. Trevor mentioned that Brenda has been asking questions about your schedule, your cases, your firearms. She's been gathering information. Ray's hand tightened on the phone. What kind of information? The kind that could be used to hurt you professionally. Ray, I think they're planning something more than just a divorce. After hanging up, Ray sat in his car in the police station parking lot, his mind racing. Brenda wasn't just betraying him. She was systematically destroying his life. The treehouse incident suddenly made perfect sense. She was trying to provoke him into an angry response that she could use as evidence of his abusive nature. Ray looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror and saw a man who had reached a crossroads. He could continue playing the role of the unsuspecting husband, gathering evidence until he had enough to expose Brenda's plan. Or he could take a different approach entirely. Ray Holloway had spent 15 years bringing criminals to justice through the system. But sometimes the system wasn't enough. Sometimes justice required a more personal touch. He pulled out his phone and began making calls. By the time he was finished, he had set in motion a plan that would give Brenda and Trevor exactly what they seemed to want: a chance to destroy Detective Ray Holloway. The only problem was, Ray had no intention of being destroyed. Instead, he was going to find out just how far they were willing to go. And then he was going to show them what real consequences looked like. The game was about to begin. Chapter 4. The Trap. Ray's plan required precise timing and the manipulation of variables that would make Brenda and Trevor feel confident enough to reveal their true intentions. Over the next week, he carefully orchestrated a series of events designed to create the perfect opportunity for them to make their move. First, he arranged for a high-profile case to land on his desk. A home invasion robbery that would require him to work late hours and be away from home more frequently. He made sure Brendan knew about the case's demands, complaining loudly about the overtime and the stress it was causing him. "I'm sorry, honey," he said one evening as he gathered his case files. "This robbery case is consuming everything. The captain wants it solved yesterday, and I'm running out of leads." Brenda looked up from her phone, where she'd been texting someone. "How long do you think it will take?" "Could be weeks. I might have to work weekends, maybe even travel to interview witnesses in other cities." Ray watched his wife's face carefully. Instead of the disappointment he would have expected, he saw something else: anticipation. Brenda was already calculating how to use his absence to her advantage. "Well, do what you need to do," she said, her tone supportive but her eyes calculating. "The kids and I will manage." That night, Ray's phone rang at 2 a.m. The caller ID showed Trevor's number. "Hello." Ray answered, his voice groggy with fake sleep. Heavy breathing on the other end, then silence. "Hello, is someone there?" The line went dead. Ray smiled in the darkness. They were testing him, trying to see if he was really asleep or if he was suspicious. Phase 1 of their plan, whatever it was, had begun. The next morning, Ray installed hidden cameras in his house. Small, wireless devices that would record everything and upload to a secure server. He placed them strategically in the living room, kitchen, and hallway, but not in the bedrooms. He wasn't interested in voyeurism. He wanted evidence of planning and conspiracy. 3 days later, Mike Torres called with an update from his continued surveillance of Trevor. "Ray, they're accelerating their timeline. Trevor was at the hardware store yesterday, buying some interesting items: zip ties, duct tape, and a prepaid cell phone." Ray felt his blood run cold. "What kind of prepaid phone?" "The kind you use when you don't want calls traced back to you." "Ray, I think they're planning something for this weekend." Ray checked his calendar. This weekend was Lily's birthday party, the one that was supposed to feature Danny's treehouse. Brenda had been planning the party for weeks, had invited Lily's entire class and their parents. It would be the perfect time for something to go wrong. "Mike, I need you to follow Trevor this weekend. I want to know everywhere he goes, everyone he talks to, everything he does." "What about you?" Ray looked at his reflection in his office window. "I'm going to be exactly where they expect me to be." Friday evening, Ray came home with flowers for Brenda and a new video game for Danny. He played the part of the devoted husband and father, helping with party preparations and asking about the weekend schedule. "The party starts at noon," Brenda said, arranging decorations in the living room. "Most of the parents are staying, so it'll be a full house." "I wish I could be here," Ray said, injecting genuine regret into his voice. "But this case is breaking open. I might have to work all weekend." Brenda's face showed fake disappointment. "Lily will be crushed. I'll try to make it back for the cake, but don't count on it." That night, Ray packed an overnight bag and made a show of leaving early Saturday morning. He kissed Brenda goodbye and hugged his children, then drove to a hotel across town where he checked in under a false name. From there, he He could monitor the cameras in his house and coordinate with Mike's surveillance of Trevor. The birthday party began at noon, and Ray watched through the hidden cameras as his house filled with children and parents. Brenda played the role of the perfect hostess, but Ray noticed how often she checked her phone and how she kept looking toward the backyard where the treehouse debris had been cleared away. At 1:30 p.m., Brenda announced that she needed to run to the store for more ice cream. She would be back in 20 minutes. Ray watched her leave, then switched to Mike's surveillance feed. Trevor was parked 2 blocks away from Ray's house, waiting. Instead of going to the store, Brenda drove to Trevor's location. Ray watched through Mike's telephoto lens as they had another intense conversation. This time, Trevor handed Brenda something, a small package that she quickly put in her purse. When Brenda returned to the party, she was carrying ice cream and acting like nothing had happened. But Ray had seen the package, and he had a good idea what it contained. The party continued for another hour. Children played games, parents made small talk, and Lily opened her presents with the enthusiasm only an 8-year-old could muster. When she asked about her special treehouse surprise, Brenda's face darkened. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. The treehouse, it wasn't safe." Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard decisions to protect the people they love. Ray watched his daughter's face fall and felt the cold calculation in his chest grow even colder. Brenda was manipulating his children, using their emotions as weapons in her war against him. After the party ended and the guests left, Ray watched Brenda put the children to bed early, claiming they were tired from all the excitement. Once Danny and Lily were asleep, she retrieved the package from her purse and made a phone call. "It's done," she said into the phone. "He's at the hotel, working on his case. The children are asleep. You can come over now." Ray switched to the exterior cameras and watched Trevor's truck pull into his driveway. His wife's lover was entering his house, walking through the door where Ray's children slept, sitting on the furniture Ray had bought, breathing the air in the sanctuary Ray had built for his family. But instead of rage, Ray felt only cold satisfaction. They were giving him everything he needed. Trevor entered through the back door, using a key Brenda had obviously provided. The two of them sat at Ray's kitchen table, and Brenda opened the package Trevor had given her earlier. Inside was a small glass vial containing a clear liquid. "Are you sure this will work?" Brenda asked, holding the vial up to the light. "My buddy swears by it," Trevor replied. "2 drops in his coffee, and he'll be out for hours. Long enough for us to set up the scene." Ray's blood turned to ice. They weren't just planning to frame him for domestic violence. They were planning to drug him and stage something that would destroy his life completely. "What about the kids?" Brenda asked. "They'll be fine. They're young enough that they won't remember much, and by the time this is over, they'll be living with you full-time." Away from him, Ray watched his wife nod, accepting the plan to traumatize his children as a necessary sacrifice. This was the woman he'd married, the mother of his children, the person he'd trusted with his life and his heart. "When do we do it?" Brenda asked. "Tomorrow night. He'll come home tired from his case. You'll make him dinner, and we'll put this in his coffee. While he's unconscious, I'll rough you up a little. Nothing serious, just enough to make it look real. Then we call 911 and report that he attacked you. With his job and his access to weapons, they'll have to take it seriously." Ray felt his hands clench into fists. Not only were they planning to destroy his career and take his children away, but Trevor was planning to assault Brenda to make their story believable. The casual way they discussed traumatizing Danny and Lily, the cold calculation behind their plan, the complete lack of regard for anyone's welfare except their own. It revealed who they really were beneath their masks. Ray had seen enough. He drove back to his house, parking 2 blocks away and approaching through the neighbor's backyard. The hidden cameras had given him everything he needed to know. Now it was time to turn the tables. He slipped through his own back door, moving with the silent precision he'd learned in the military. Trevor and Brenda were still in the kitchen, finalizing their plans. Ray could hear their voices as he crept up the stairs to check on his children. Danny and Lily were both sleeping peacefully, unaware that their mother was downstairs planning to destroy their family. Ray looked at their innocent faces and felt something inside him crystallize into diamond-hard resolve. He crept back downstairs and listened to the final details of their plan. Tomorrow night, they would drug him stage a domestic violence scene, and call the police. Brenda would get full custody of the children, Ray would lose his job and possibly face criminal charges, and Trevor would move in to play stepfather to Danny and Lily. Ray had heard enough. He slipped back outside and returned to his hotel, where he spent the rest of the night planning his response. By morning, he had a plan that would give Trevor and Brenda exactly what they wanted, a chance to destroy Detective Ray Holloway. The only difference was Ray would be controlling every aspect of their success. Chapter 5. The Revelation. Sunday morning brought rain and the kind of gray skies that matched Ray's mood perfectly. He sat in his hotel room, surrounded by printed screenshots from his hidden cameras, audio recordings from Mike's surveillance, and a detailed timeline of Brenda and Trevor's conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming, but Ray wasn't interested in simply exposing them. He wanted them to experience the same devastation they had planned for him. Ray's phone buzzed with a text from Brenda. "Hope the case is going well. Miss you. The kids are asking when you'll be home." He stared at the message, marveling at his wife's ability to maintain the pretense even now. She was asking when he'd be home so she could finalize the timing of his destruction. Ray typed back, "Should be home around 6 p.m. Looking forward to a quiet evening with my family." The response came quickly. "I'll make your favorite dinner. We need to talk about some things." Ray smiled grimly. She was setting up the final scene, preparing to serve him the drug coffee that would render him helpless while they staged their elaborate lie. But Ray had no intention of being anyone's victim. At noon, Ray drove to the office where Lisa was catching up on paperwork. She looked up as he entered, immediately noticing his expression. "You look like a man who's made a decision," she observed. Ray sat down across from her desk and laid out everything. The surveillance footage, the audio recordings, the planned drugging, and false accusations. Lisa listened in stunned silence, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. "Jesus, Ray, they were really going to destroy you. They still think they are." Ray pulled out his phone and showed her Brenda's latest text. "Tonight's the night." Lisa studied the evidence spread across her desk. "You have enough here to arrest them both. Conspiracy, attempted assault, child endangerment. They'd both go away for years." Ray shook his head. "Prison is too easy. They'd serve their time, get out, and move on with their lives. I want them to understand what it feels like to have everything you've built systematically destroyed. What are you planning?" Ray stood up and began pacing. "Brenda wants to paint me as an abusive husband who can't control his temper. Trevor wants to play the hero who rescues her from the dangerous cop. They've created elaborate fiction about who I am and what I've done. So I'm going to let them live in that fiction." Lisa frowned. "I don't understand." Ray sat back down, his eyes cold and calculating. "Tonight, I'm going to give them exactly what they expect. I'm going to come home angry, frustrated, looking like a man on the edge. I'm going to drink the coffee Brenda serves me, but not before switching it with coffee from my own thermos. Then I'm going to pretend to pass out. That's incredibly dangerous, Ray. What if something goes wrong? Nothing will go wrong because you're going to be watching. You and Mike will have the house surrounded. The moment Trevor lays a hand on Brenda to create their fake evidence, you'll have them for conspiracy and assault. But more importantly, I'll have them on record admitting what they've done." Lisa shook her head. "Ray, this is vigilante justice. Let the system handle it." Ray looked at his partner, this woman who had become like a sister to him over the years they'd worked together. "Lisa, they were planning to traumatize my children to cover their tracks. They were going to destroy my career, my reputation, and my family. The system will give them a few years in prison. I want them to lose everything, the way they planned to take everything from me." That evening, Ray drove home through the rain, his mind focused on the performance he was about to give. He parked in his driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the house he'd built, the life he'd created, the family that was about to be torn apart by betrayal. He entered through the front door, calling out to his children. Danny and Lily ran to greet him, and for a moment, Ray allowed himself to feel the pure joy of their love. These children had done nothing wrong, yet they were about to witness something that would change their understanding of their mother forever. "How was your weekend, Dad?" Danny asked, studying his father's face with a perceptiveness that reminded Ray so much of himself. "Challenging, son, but we're close to solving the case." Brenda appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, wearing the blue dress Ray had bought her for their anniversary. She looked beautiful, radiant even, like a woman preparing for a celebration. "Welcome home, honey. You look exhausted." Ray allowed fatigue to show in his posture, his expression. "It's been a long few days. I'm just glad to be home. Why don't you sit down? I'll get you some coffee." Ray nodded and moved to his favorite chair in the living room. Through the window, he could see Mike's van parked across the street, and he knew Lisa was positioned in the backyard. Everything was in place. Brenda brought him the coffee in his favorite mug, the one Danny had made in art class years ago. The irony wasn't lost on Ray. She was using their son's gift to deliver what she thought would be his destruction. "Thank you," Ray said, accepting the mug. The coffee smelled normal, but Ray knew it contained enough sedative to render him unconscious for hours. "Ray, before you drink that, we need to talk." Ray looked up at his wife, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in months. The woman standing before him was a stranger wearing Brenda's face, someone who could look at their children's drawings on the refrigerator while planning to traumatize them for personal gain. "What about?" Brenda sat down across from him, her hands folded in her lap like a child preparing to confess a minor transgression. "I haven't been happy, Ray, for a long time now." Ray took a sip of the coffee, making sure she saw him swallow. "What do you mean?" "I mean our marriage. Your job consumes everything. You're never here, and when you are, you're thinking about your cases. I feel like I'm married to a ghost." Ray took another sip, playing his part perfectly. "I work hard to provide for this family, Brenda. Everything I do is for you and the kids. But what about what I need? What about my happiness?" Ray felt the bitter irony of the conversation. Here was his wife, preparing to drug him and destroy his life, lecturing him about her happiness. "What are you saying, Brenda?" She leaned forward, her green eyes bright with what looked like genuine emotion. "I'm saying I want a divorce, Ray. I want to take the kids and start over somewhere else." Ray stared at her, allowing shock and hurt to show on his face. "A divorce? Brenda, we can work through this. We can go to counseling. I can change my schedule." "No." Her voice was firm, decisive. "I've already made up my mind. I've been seeing someone else, Ray. Someone who understands me, who puts me first." Ray took another drink of the coffee, then set the mug down with shaking hands. "You've been having an affair? I've been finding myself. For the first time in years, I feel alive, appreciated, loved." Ray stood up, swaying slightly as if the drugs were beginning to take effect. "Who is he? That doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm done pretending to be happy in a marriage that died years ago." Ray stumbled, catching himself on the arm of his chair. I don't feel good." Brenda's expression changed, concern replacing the coldness. But Ray recognized it as the concern of someone worried their plan might be failing, not the worry of a wife for her husband's well-being. "Maybe you should sit down," she suggested. Ray collapsed back into his chair, his eyes rolling back as if he were losing consciousness. Through nearly closed lids, he watched Brenda pull out her phone and send a text. 5 minutes later, Trevor entered through the back door. Ray heard his footsteps, heard him whisper to Brenda. "Is he out?" "I think so. How much time do we have?" "Enough. You sure you're ready for this?" Ray listened as they moved around the living room, and he felt Trevor's presence looming over him. Through slitted eyes, he saw the man who had been planning to destroy his family, who had been meeting his wife while his children waited in the car. "Remember, you have to make it look real," Trevor whispered to Brenda. "A few bruises, maybe a split lip. Nothing too serious, but enough to be convincing." Ray heard Brenda's sharp intake of breath. "I know. Seeing him like this, it's harder than I thought it would be. You want a better life or not? You want to be free of him?" "Yes, I want to be free." Ray heard the sound of flesh hitting flesh, heard Brenda cry out softly. They were creating their fake evidence, staging the scene that would destroy his reputation and take his children away from him. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had revealed their true nature completely, and Ray had recorded every word. As Trevor prepared to hit Brenda again, Ray's eyes snapped open. "That's enough," he said quietly. Trevor spun around, shock written across his face. Brenda gasped, touching the red mark on her cheek where Trevor had struck her. Ray stood up smoothly, no longer pretending to be drugged. Both of you sit down. We need to have a real conversation. Trevor reached for something in his jacket, but Ray was faster. Years of police work had kept him in excellent shape, and his military training had never truly left him. He grabbed Trevor's wrist and twisted, sending whatever he'd been reaching for clattering across the floor. I said sit down. The authority in Ray's voice, the cold promise of violence if they didn't comply, made both Trevor and Brenda sink onto the couch like chastened children. Ray walked to the kitchen and returned with his own coffee mug, the one he'd been drinking from all along. He held up Brenda's drugged coffee next to it. Interesting conversation you two were having. Very illuminating. Brenda's face had gone white. Ray, I can explain. No need. I heard everything. The plan to drug me, the fake domestic violence, the custody grab. All of it. Ray pulled out his phone and played back a recording of their conversation from just minutes earlier. Their voices filled the room, discussing how to make Brenda's injuries look convincing, how to traumatize the children, how to destroy Ray's life. The question now, Ray continued, is what we're going to do about it. Trevor found his voice. You can't use that recording. It's illegal wiretapping. Ray smiled, and the expression was colder than anything Trevor had ever seen. You're absolutely right, which is why we're not going to court. We're going to handle this a different way. Ray walked to the window and signaled to the street. Within seconds, Lisa and Mike entered through the front door, followed by two uniformed officers. Gentlemen, meet my wife Brenda and her boyfriend Trevor. They've just confessed to conspiracy, attempted assault, and child endangerment. Brenda looked around wildly. Ray, please. Think about the children. Think about our family. Ray's expression didn't change. I'm thinking about them. I'm thinking about how you were willing to traumatize them to cover your tracks. I'm thinking about how you brought them to his apartment and left them in the car while you betrayed our family. I'm thinking about how you destroyed Danny's treehouse to provoke me into giving you evidence for your lies. Trevor tried to stand, but Mike pushed him back down. You think you're so smart, cop? You think this is over? Ray walked over to Trevor, close enough that the other man could see the deadly calm in his eyes. No, Trevor, this is just the beginning. See, I know all about your history. The domestic violence charges, the restraining orders, the women you've hurt. And now I have evidence of you planning to assault my wife and frame me for it. Ray turned to Brenda, who was crying now, though he couldn't tell if the tears were real or part of another performance. And you, Brenda, you're going to find out what it's like to lose everything you've built. Your real estate license, your reputation, your relationship with our children. All of it. Ray, please, Brenda begged. I made a mistake. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can... No, Ray said quietly. We can't, because this wasn't a mistake. This was a plan. A deliberate, calculated plan to destroy me and traumatize our children. And I don't forgive people who hurt my family. As Lisa read Trevor his rights and the uniformed officers prepared to take him away, Ray knelt down to Brenda's level. You wanted to be free of me, he said softly. Congratulations. You got your wish. The last thing Brenda saw before the police car doors closed was Ray standing in the doorway of their home, no longer the man she had married, but someone else entirely. Someone who had looked into the abyss of betrayal and had chosen to stare back without blinking. The revelation was complete. Now came the reckoning. Chapter 6, The Consequences. The next 72 hours unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of destruction, with Ray conducting every movement from behind the scenes. While Trevor sat in county lockup on charges of conspiracy and attempted assault, and Brenda had been released on bond with a restraining order preventing her from taking the children out of state, Ray was methodically dismantling the life she had built alongside their marriage. Monday morning found Ray in the office of Margaret Stern, the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city. Margaret was a woman in her 50s who had built her reputation on destroying unfaithful spouses with surgical precision. Detective Holloway, she said, reviewing the files Ray had brought. I've seen a lot of betrayal in my 30 years of practice, but this is remarkably comprehensive. Your wife and her accomplice documented their own conspiracy. Ray sat across from her mahogany desk, his expression calm, but his eyes burning with cold determination. I want full custody of my children. I want the house, the cars, everything. I want her to leave this marriage with nothing but the knowledge that her choices destroyed her family." Margaret smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "The recordings are inadmissible in court, but the conspiracy charges give us leverage. Your wife's attorney will recommend she accept whatever terms we offer rather than risk a lengthy court battle while facing criminal charges." "What about her real estate license?" "I've already filed complaints with the state licensing board. Conspiracy to commit fraud, moral turpitude, conduct unbecoming a professional. Even if the criminal charges get reduced, she'll never sell real estate again." Ray nodded. "And Trevor? Mr. Kowalski is looking at 3 to 5 years, especially with his prior domestic violence convictions. His construction company will fold without him, and he'll be bankrupt before he gets out of prison." That afternoon, Ray picked up Danny and Lily from school personally, something he hadn't been able to do regularly due to his work schedule. Both children sensed that something fundamental had changed in their family dynamic, but Ray wasn't ready to explain the full scope of their mother's betrayal. "Dad, where's Mom?" Lily asked as they drove home. "She was supposed to pick us up today." Ray looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror, this innocent child who had been used as a pawn in her mother's game. "Your mom is dealing with some problems right now, sweetheart. She's going to be staying somewhere else for a while." Danny, more perceptive at 15, studied his father's profile. "Is this about the treehouse?" Ray met his son's eyes in the mirror. "It's about a lot of things, son. Things that have been building for a long time." That evening, Ray sat both children down in the living room where, just days earlier, Brenda had planned to drug him and stage her assault. The irony of the location wasn't lost on him. "Kids, I need to tell you something important about your mother and our family." He chose his words carefully, explaining that Brenda had been lying to them, that she had been seeing another man, and that she had planned to take them away from their home and their father. He didn't mention the drugging or the stage violence. Some truths were too heavy for children to carry. Lily cried, not fully understanding, but sensing the permanence of the change. Danny's reaction was different, a cold anger that reminded Ray uncomfortably of himself. "She destroyed my tree house because she wanted you to get angry," Danny said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes, son. She used us. Our feelings, our love for her. She used all of it as weapons against you." Ray pulled both children close. "I'm sorry you have to learn this about your mother. I'm sorry your family is broken." Danny looked up at his father with eyes older than his years. "She broke it, Dad. Not you." Wednesday morning brought the first real consequence of Ray's methodical revenge. Brenda's real estate firm, Pinnacle Properties, fired her after the licensing board complaints became public. Her picture was removed from the company website. Her business cards were called, her office cleaned out by security. Ray received a text from her. "Ray, please. I've lost my job. I can't afford my apartment. Can we talk?" He showed the message to Lisa as they sat in their squad car during patrol. She's starting to understand that actions have consequences. How are the kids handling it? Ray thought about the conversation he'd had with Danny the night before. His son had asked pointed questions about the timeline of Brenda's affair, about the treehouse destruction, about the lies she'd told. Danny was processing the betrayal with the same analytical mind he'd inherited from Ray, and the conclusions he was reaching were hardening him in ways that broke Ray's heart. Danny's angry, really angry. Lily's confused and hurt. They both feel betrayed, but they're handling it differently. Lisa studied her partner's profile. "And how are you handling it?" Ray was quiet for a long moment. "I feel like I failed them, like I should have seen what Brenda was becoming, should have protected them from this." "Ray, you didn't fail anybody. You were working to provide for your family while your wife was planning to destroy it. That's not your fault." Thursday brought Trevor's arraignment, where he pleaded not guilty to all charges despite the overwhelming evidence against him. Ray sat in the courtroom gallery, watching as the man who had planned to assault his wife and frame him for it tried to maintain his innocence. After the hearing, Trevor's attorney approached Ray in the hallway. "Detective, my client would like to discuss a plea arrangement." Ray studied the young lawyer, probably fresh out of law school, and trying to minimize the damage to his client. "What kind of arrangement?" "Mr. Kowalski is willing to testify against your wife in exchange for reduced charges. He's prepared to admit that the entire conspiracy was her idea, that she seduced him into participating." Ray felt a cold smile cross his face. Tell your client that I'm not interested in his testimony. Tell him that he's going to serve every day of his sentence. And when he gets out, he'll find that his reputation follows him wherever he goes. Friday afternoon, Ray received a call from Margaret Stern. Brenda's attorney wanted to meet to discuss settlement terms. She's ready to capitulate, Margaret said. Full custody to you, minimal visitation rights for her. She keeps her personal belongings and her car. You keep everything else. She's desperate to avoid a trial while facing criminal charges. Ray thought about his children, about the home he'd built, about the life Brenda had tried to destroy. Set up the meeting. Saturday morning, Ray sat across from Brenda in a sterile conference room at Margaret's law firm. His wife looked like she'd aged years in the past week. Her auburn hair was unwashed, her designer clothes wrinkled, her green eyes rimmed with dark circles. Ray, she said as soon as she saw him. Thank you for coming. I know we can work this out. Ray didn't respond. He simply stared at the woman who had shared his bed for 12 years, who had borne his children, who had planned to drug him and destroy his life. Brenda's attorney cleared his throat. Detective Holloway, my client, is prepared to accept the custody and property arrangements as outlined. In exchange, she's hoping you might consider asking the prosecutor to reduce the charges against her. Ray leaned back in his chair. Brenda, do you remember what you said to me about the treehouse? You said Danny needed to be humbled. Brenda's face crumpled. Ray, I'm sorry. I was confused. I wasn't thinking clearly. No, Ray interrupted. You were thinking very clearly. You had a plan, and you executed it step by step. You destroyed our son's project to provoke me. You gathered information about my job, my schedule, my weaknesses. You recruited a man with a history of violence to help you frame me. You were willing to traumatize our children to cover your tracks. Ray stood up, his decision made. You wanted me to be humble, Brenda. Instead, you're going to learn what that word really means. He walked toward the door, then turned back. By the way, Trevor's attorney approached me about a plea deal. He's willing to testify that the entire conspiracy was your idea in exchange for reduced charges. Brenda's face went white. Ray, no. Please. You chose this path, Brenda. Every step of the way, you chose betrayal over family, lies over truth, destruction over healing. Now you get to live with those choices. Ray left the conference room without looking back. In the hallway, Margaret caught up with him. She'll sign the papers, his attorney said. Today, she's terrified of facing trial alone while Trevor testifies against her. Ray nodded. Make sure the custody arrangement includes supervised visitation only. I don't trust her alone with my children. That evening, Ray sat in his backyard with Danny, looking at the spot where the treehouse had stood. His son was whittling a piece of wood with focused precision, his hands moving with practiced skill. What are you making? Ray asked. Danny held up the wood, revealing the rough shape of a small bird. Something for Lily. She's been sad about Mom. Ray watched his son work, seeing the care and patience in every cut. You know, we could build another treehouse. A better one. Danny looked up at his father. Would you help me? Every step of the way. As the sun set behind them, Ray felt something settling into place. Brenda and Trevor would face the consequences of their choices. His children would heal, supported by a father who would never betray their trust. And the life they built going forward would be stronger because it was founded on truth rather than lies. The consequences phase was complete. Now came the final reckoning. Chapter 7, The Reckoning. 6 months later, Ray stood in his backyard watching Danny put the finishing touches on the new treehouse. This structure was different from the first one, bigger, stronger, and built with the wisdom that comes from having learned hard lessons about trust and betrayal. Danny had insisted on using only new materials, refusing to salvage anything from the wreckage of his original project. I don't want any part of what she destroyed to be in this one, Danny had explained, and Ray understood completely. The treehouse had become more than just a birthday gift for Lily. It had become a symbol of their family's ability to rebuild, to create something beautiful from the ashes of what had been lost. Every board measured twice and cut once, every joint fitted with precision, every decision made together. Lily was now 9, and the past 6 months had been a journey of healing for her. She still asked about her mother sometimes, but the questions came less frequently. The supervised visits with Brenda had been awkward and painful, filled with stilted conversation and unspoken truths. Eventually, Brenda had stopped showing up altogether. "She's still our mom," Lily had said one evening after a missed visit. "But she's not the same person anymore." Ray had held his daughter close, marveling at her wisdom. "Sometimes people change, sweetheart. And sometimes we have to accept that the person we thought we knew was never really there." Danny, now 16, had processed his mother's betrayal with the same methodical approach he applied to his woodworking. He'd asked hard questions, demanded honest answers, and ultimately reached his own conclusions about the woman who had raised him. "I don't forgive her," he told Ray one night while they worked on the treehouse. "I understand why she did what she did. She was selfish and wanted what she wanted more than she wanted our family. But understanding doesn't mean forgiving." Ray had looked at his son, this young man who was becoming someone he could be proud of. "You don't have to forgive her, son. Forgiveness is something you give because you choose to, not because you're obligated to." The criminal cases had played out exactly as Ray had orchestrated. Trevor had indeed tried to cut a deal, testifying that Brenda had seduced him into the conspiracy and that the entire plan had been her idea. His testimony had been devastating, painting Brenda as a manipulative woman who used sex and false promises to convince him to participate in destroying her husband. Brenda's attorney had tried to argue that she was the victim of an abusive relationship with Trevor, but the evidence was overwhelming. The recorded conversations, the financial records, the timeline of events, all of it pointed to a woman who had carefully planned the destruction of her family. In the end, Trevor received 4 years for conspiracy and attempted assault. Brenda received 3 years, suspended to 18 months with probation. Both were required to pay restitution to Ray for his legal fees and the costs of the investigation. But Ray's revenge had extended far beyond the courtroom. Brenda's real estate license was permanently revoked. Her employment history was now a matter of public record, making it nearly impossible for her to find work in any field requiring background checks. The apartment she'd rented had evicted her when the landlord learned about her criminal charges. She'd been forced to move back in with her elderly parents, a situation that had strained that relationship to the breaking point. More devastating was the social cost. Brenda's friends had abandoned her when the details of her conspiracy became public. The other parents at Lily's school avoided her during the brief period when she still had visitation rights. Her reputation in their small community was permanently destroyed. Trevor's construction company had folded while he was in prison. His employees had scattered to other jobs, and the equipment had been sold to pay debts. When he was eventually released, he would emerge to find that Ray had systematically contacted every construction company in the tri-state area, ensuring that Trevor's history of domestic violence and conspiracy charges followed him wherever he tried to work. Ray's revenge had been thorough, methodical, and absolutely devastating. He had given both Brenda and Trevor exactly what they had tried to give him: the complete destruction of their lives and reputations. Lisa had watched her partner's transformation over the months with a mixture of admiration and concern. Ray had become colder, more calculating, less inclined to give people the benefit of the doubt. He was still a good cop, perhaps even a better one, but something fundamental had changed in him. "You got what you wanted," she observed one afternoon as they finished paperwork on a domestic violence case. "They're both destroyed. Their lives are ruined. But what did it cost you?" Ray looked up from his files. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you become someone different, Ray. Harder, less trusting. The man I knew 6 months ago would have tried to find a way to save his marriage, to protect his wife even from herself. This version of you orchestrated her complete destruction without blinking." Ray was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. "The man I was 6 months ago was naive, Lisa. He believed that people were fundamentally good, that love and trust were enough to protect his family. That man was weak. Was he? Or was he just human?" Ray closed his file and looked at his partner. That man would have forgiven Brenda. He would have gone to counseling, tried to understand what had driven her to betray him, maybe even taken her back eventually. And where would that have left Danny and Lily? Living with a mother who was willing to traumatize them for personal gain? watching their father accept betrayal as the price of keeping the family together. Lisa nodded slowly. So you chose to become someone else. I chose to become someone who protects his family no matter what the cost. That evening, Ray climbed up into the new treehouse with Lily. The structure was beautiful, with windows that caught the evening light and a small reading nook where his daughter could escape with her books. Danny had built it with love and care, and it showed in every detail. "Do you miss her, Daddy?" Lily asked, settling beside him with a book about dragons. Ray looked at his daughter, this beautiful child who had inherited her mother's green eyes, but, he hoped, none of her capacity for betrayal. "I miss who I thought she was, sweetheart, but the person I thought she was never really existed." Lily nodded with the acceptance that children sometimes show in the face of adult complexities. Danny says she made her choices, and now she has to live with them. Danny's right. Are you happy, Daddy? Without her? Ray considered the question carefully. Was he happy? He felt satisfied, vindicated, successful in protecting his children from further harm. But happiness? That was more complicated. "I'm content, Lily. I know that you and Danny are safe, that our family is strong, that no one can hurt us the way she did ever again. That's enough for me." Later that night, after both children were asleep, Ray sat in his study reviewing the final papers from his divorce. The settlement had been even more favorable than he'd hoped. Brenda had signed away all rights to the house, the cars, even her share of his police pension. In exchange, she'd avoided a lengthy trial that would have exposed even more devastating details about her conspiracy. Ray's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Please, Ray. I know I have no right to ask, but I need help. I can't find work. I can't afford rent. I'm living in my car. Just this once, for the sake of what we once had. Please help me." Ray stared at the message for a long time. He could picture Brenda typing it, probably sitting in her car in some parking lot, desperate and broken, and finally understanding the full scope of what her choices had cost her. He deleted the message without responding. The next morning brought news that completed Ray's sense of justice. Margaret Stern called to inform him that Trevor had been attacked in prison by another inmate. He would survive, but the incident had taught him that even behind bars, his reputation preceded him. Apparently, conspiracy to frame a police officer doesn't make you popular in Gen Pop, Margaret observed dryly. Ray felt no satisfaction in Trevor's suffering, only a cold acknowledgement that actions have consequences. The man had chosen to involve himself in destroying Ray's family, and now he was learning what that choice really meant. As Ray drove to work that morning, he passed the apartment complex where Trevor used to live. It had been demolished to make way for a shopping center, erasing the last physical reminder of where Brenda had betrayed her family. At the office, Lisa was waiting with her case files for the day. She studied Ray's face as he settled at his desk. "You heard about Trevor," she said. "I heard." And Ray looked at his partner, this woman who had helped him uncover the truth about his wife's betrayal. And nothing. He made his choices, just like Brenda made hers. "I'm not responsible for the consequences they face." Lisa nodded, accepting his response, but still watching him with concern. "Ray, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Always. If Danny or Lily ever betrayed you the way Brenda did, would you destroy them too?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Ray was quiet for a long moment, considering not just the words but the implications behind them. "My children are different," he said finally. "They're part of me in a way Brenda never was. Their blood, their future, they're the best parts of who I am. I would do anything to protect them, including protecting them from their own mistakes. But would you forgive them?" Ray met Lisa's eyes steadily. "I would guide them, teach them, help them understand the consequences of their choices. But forgiveness? That would depend on what they did and whether they understood the harm they'd caused." Lisa nodded, not entirely satisfied with the answer, but understanding that it was the truth. That afternoon, Ray received a call from Danny's school. His son had gotten into a fight with another student who had made disparaging comments about Brenda. Danny had broken the other boy's nose and was facing suspension. Ray drove to the school immediately, finding Danny sitting in the principal's office with ice on his knuckles and defiance in his eyes. "He said Mom was a whore," Danny explained without preamble. "He said she got what she deserved, and that our whole family was trash. Ray looked at his son, seeing himself reflected in the boy's rigid posture and barely controlled anger. And you felt you had to defend her honor? Danny's expression flickered with uncertainty. She's still my mother. Ray sat down beside his son, choosing his words carefully. Danny, your mother made choices that hurt our family. The consequences she's facing are the result of those choices, not anything you or I did to her. You don't have to defend her actions, but you also don't have to carry her shame. Then why does it matter what people say about her? Ray studied his son's face, seeing the confusion and pain beneath the anger. It doesn't matter what they say about her. What matters is what you choose to do with your own life, your own reputation, your own character. You can't control what your mother did, but you can control who you become. Danny nodded slowly, processing the advice. Dad, do you think I'm like her? Like, am I going to end up hurting people the way she did? Ray pulled his son into a fierce hug. No, son, you're nothing like her. You build things, she destroyed them. You think about how your actions affect others. She only thought about herself. You have integrity, honor, and loyalty. Those are the qualities that will define who you become. That evening, as Ray tucked Lily into bed, she asked him a question that cut straight to the heart of everything that had happened. Daddy, when I grow up, how will I know if someone really loves me or if they're just pretending like Mommy was? Ray sat on the edge of her bed, looking down at this innocent child who had learned too young that love could be a lie. You'll know by their actions, sweetheart. People who really love you will protect you, support your dreams, and never ask you to lie for them. They'll be consistent, the same person in private as they are in public, and they'll never use your love as a weapon against you or anyone else. Lily nodded solemnly. Like you do with us? Like I do with you. Chapter 8, The Final Test. 1 year after the treehouse incident, Ray received an unexpected phone call that would test every principle he'd built his new life upon. The caller was Dr. Patricia Reeves, a psychiatrist at the state mental health facility. Detective Holloway, I'm calling about your ex-wife, Brenda. She's been a patient here for the past 3 months. Ray felt his blood run cold. What happened? She was found in her car with an empty bottle of sleeping pills. It was ruled a suicide attempt. She's been under psychiatric care since then, and she's been asking to see you and the children. Ray was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. How is she? Severely depressed, experiencing what we believe to be a complete psychological breakdown. She's been talking extensively about the choices she made, expressing what appears to be genuine remorse for her actions. And you're calling me because? Dr. Reeves hesitated. Detective, I'll be direct with you. Your ex-wife is consumed with guilt over what she did to your family. She speaks about you and the children constantly, and her recovery is being hindered by her belief that she's irredeemably destroyed the people she loves most. A visit from you, some indication of forgiveness, might be crucial to her healing. Ray thought about Brenda, this woman who had tried to destroy his life, now broken and hospitalized because she couldn't live with the consequences of her choices. Part of him felt a cold satisfaction. This was exactly the kind of complete destruction he had orchestrated. But another part, a part he thought he'd killed, felt something that might have been pity. I'll think about it, he told Dr. Reeves. That evening, Ray discussed the situation with Danny and Lily. Both children had mixed reactions to the news that their mother had tried to kill herself. Is she going to be okay? Lily asked, her green eyes wide with concern. The doctors think she will be, with proper treatment and time. Danny's response was colder. She made her choice, Dad. Just like you always say, actions have consequences. Ray studied his 16-year-old son, seeing his own philosophy reflected back at him with crystalline clarity. Was this what he had taught Danny? That people who made mistakes deserved no compassion, no possibility of redemption? Danny, do you think there's ever a situation where someone deserves a second chance? Danny considered the question seriously. I think people can change, but they have to prove it. And they have to understand that earning forgiveness doesn't mean erasing consequences. Lily looked between her father and brother. I think Mommy is sad because she knows she was wrong. Maybe if we told her we don't hate her, she would feel better. Ray was struck by his daughter's capacity for compassion, even after everything Brenda had done. It reminded him of who he used to be before betrayal had hardened his heart into something unforgiving. The next day, Ray drove to the mental health facility. The building was modern and clean, designed to feel more like a hospital than an asylum. But Ray could still sense the desperation that permeated places where broken minds came to heal. Dr. Reeves met him in the lobby, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who dealt with human suffering daily. Detective Holloway, thank you for coming. Before you see Brenda, I want you to understand her current mental state. She's fragile, volatile, and deeply ashamed of her actions. She's also convinced that you hate her and that her children will never forgive her. Ray followed the doctor down a hallway lined with artwork created by patients. Do you think she's genuinely remorseful, or is this manipulation? In my professional opinion, this is genuine remorse coupled with severe depression. She's not trying to manipulate you, detective. She's trying to find a reason to keep living. They stopped outside a door marked with Brenda's name. Through the small window, Ray could see his ex-wife sitting on a narrow bed, staring out the window at the facility's garden. She looked like a shadow of the woman he'd married. Thin, pale, her auburn hair now streaked with gray. I'll give you privacy, Dr. Reeves said, but I'll be nearby if you need anything. Ray entered the room, and Brenda looked up with eyes that were haunted and hollow. When she saw him, she began to cry. Not the manipulative tears he'd grown accustomed to, but the broken sobs of someone whose spirit had been shattered. Ray, she whispered. You came. Ray sat in the chair across from her bed, studying the woman who had tried to destroy his life. Dr. Reeves said you wanted to see me. Brenda wiped her eyes with a tissue, her hands shaking. I wanted to tell you how sorry I am. I know it doesn't change anything. I know it doesn't fix what I broke, but I needed you to know that I understand what I did. Ray remained silent, letting her speak. I was selfish, Ray. So incredibly selfish. I convinced myself that I deserved to be happy, that my feelings mattered more than our family, more than our children's security. I told myself lies about you, about our marriage, because it was easier than admitting I was choosing to betray the best man I'd ever known. Brenda's voice broke, and she had to pause to compose herself. The treehouse. God, Ray, I destroyed something beautiful that our son made with love, and I did it to hurt you. What kind of mother does that? What kind of person destroys their child's joy to serve their own agenda? Ray felt something shifting inside him, a crack in the ice that had formed around his heart. Why, Brenda? Why did you do it? She looked at him with eyes full of pain and self-awareness. Because I was weak. Because I was bored with my life, and instead of working to make it better, I chose to blame you for my unhappiness. Trevor made me feel exciting, desirable, like I was the center of someone's world. And I was so addicted to that feeling that I was willing to sacrifice everything for it. Ray leaned forward. Including our children's well-being. Including our children's well-being, she agreed, fresh tears streaming down her face. Ray, I know you'll never forgive me. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know that losing you and Danny and Lily has taught me who I really was, a selfish, destructive person who took a beautiful family for granted. Ray was quiet for a long moment, processing her words and his own reaction to them. The woman sitting before him bore little resemblance to the cold, calculating person who had planned to drug him and stage her own assault. This was someone who had been broken by the consequences of her choices, who had learned too late what her actions had cost. What do you want from me, Brenda? She looked up at him with desperate hope. I want to know that someday, maybe years from now, you might be able to think of me without hatred. I want to know that you'll tell Danny and Lily that their mother loved them, even though she made terrible choices. I want to know that I haven't destroyed every good memory we ever shared. Ray stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where other patients walked slowly along winding paths. He thought about the years since the treehouse incident, about the cold satisfaction he'd felt as he systematically destroyed Brenda's life, about the person he'd become in pursuit of justice. He thought about Danny's hard edges, about Lily's questions about love and trust, about the way he'd taught his children that betrayal was unforgivable and that people didn't deserve second chances. He thought about the man he'd been before Brenda's betrayal, someone who believed in redemption, in the possibility of change, in the power of forgiveness to heal both the wounded and the one who had caused the wounds. Ray turned back to face his ex-wife. Brenda, I can't forgive you yet. Maybe I never will. What you did was unforgivable. Not just the affair, but the conspiracy, the willingness to traumatize our children, the systematic plan to destroy my life. Brenda nodded, accepting his words. But Ray continued, I don't hate you anymore. Hate requires too much energy, and I'd rather spend that energy building a good life for Danny and Lily. Hope flickered in Brenda's eyes. The children, how are they? They're strong. They're healing. Danny built a new tree house for Lily, and it's beautiful. They're learning that people they love can disappoint them, but that doesn't mean they should stop believing in love itself. Ray moved toward the door. Brenda, I want you to get better. Not for me, not for us, but for yourself. You need to learn to live with what you've done, to become someone who could never make those choices again. Do you think that's possible? Ray paused with his hand on the door handle. I think people can change if they want it badly enough. Whether you want to change enough to do the hard work of becoming someone different, that's up to you. As Ray left the facility, he felt something he hadn't experienced in over a year. Uncertainty about his own choices. Had his systematic destruction of Brenda's life been justice? Or had it been revenge disguised as justice? Had he protected his children? Or had he taught them that mercy was weakness? That evening, Ray sat with Danny and Lily in the new tree house, watching the sun set through the branches of the old maple tree. How is Mom? Lily asked. She's sick, sweetheart. Very sad and very sorry for what she did. Danny looked at his father intently. Do you believe her? Ray considered the question carefully. I believe she's sorry now. Whether she would have been sorry if she hadn't been caught, if her plan had worked, that's something we'll never know. Are you going to help her? Lily asked. Ray looked at his daughter, this child who still believed in the possibility of redemption even after being betrayed by her own mother. I'm going to let her get the help she needs. That's not the same as helping her myself, but it's not trying to hurt her either. Danny nodded slowly. So we're not going to be a family again, but we're not going to be enemies either. That's right, son. As they climbed down from the treehouse and walked back to the house, Ray realized that his children were teaching him something important. Danny had learned to set boundaries, to protect himself from further harm while not carrying hatred in his heart. Lily had learned to extend compassion without being naive about human nature. Perhaps there was wisdom in their approach, a middle ground between the blind trust he'd once offered and the cold revenge he'd embraced. Chapter 9. The Resolution. 2 years after Brenda's suicide attempt, Ray stood in his backyard watching Danny teach Lily how to use a circular saw. His son, now 18 and preparing for college, had developed into a remarkable young man, strong, principled, and capable of both setting boundaries and showing compassion. The treehouse had become the centerpiece of their backyard, a testament to the family's ability to rebuild something beautiful from the wreckage of betrayal. But more than that, it had become a symbol of the lessons they'd all learned about trust, forgiveness, and the complexity of human nature. Ray's phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Reeves. Brenda has been discharged from our facility. She's requested your contact information to send a letter. May I provide it? Ray stared at the message for a long moment. Brenda had spent nearly 2 years in psychiatric treatment, first as an inpatient and then in a structured outpatient program. According to Dr. Reeves' periodic updates, she had made significant progress in understanding and taking responsibility for her actions. Ray typed back, yes, you may provide it. 3 days later, an envelope arrived in Ray's mailbox. His name and address were written in Brenda's familiar handwriting, but the penmanship was different, steadier, more careful, as if each letter had been considered before being written. That evening, after Danny and Lily were asleep, Ray sat in his study and opened the letter. Dear Ray, I know I have no right to contact you, and I understand if you choose not to read this. But my therapist says that making amends, real amends, not just apologies, is part of my recovery, and I wanted to try to do that properly. First, I want you to know that I've spent the last 2 years learning who I really was when I destroyed our family. I was a selfish, manipulative person who convinced herself that her happiness mattered more than her children's security. I was someone who could look at the beautiful thing our son had created and destroy it to serve my own agenda. I was someone who could plan to drug and frame the man who had given me everything, just because I was bored with the life we'd built together. I am not writing to make excuses or to ask for forgiveness. I am writing to tell you that I understand the full scope of what I did, and I accept that the consequences I faced were entirely of my own making. I want you to know that I think about Danny and Lily every day, not in a way that causes me pain. My therapist has helped me learn the difference between healthy grief and self-destructive guilt, but in a way that reminds me of what I had and what I chose to throw away. I hope they are happy. I hope they are learning to trust again. I hope they know that their mother's failures don't reflect anything wrong with them. I also want you to know that I understand why you did what you did after you discovered my betrayal. For a long time, I was angry about how thoroughly you destroyed my life. I felt like you were cruel, vindictive, excessive in your revenge. But I understand now that you were protecting our children from someone who had proven she would sacrifice their well-being for her own desires. You were making sure that someone who had betrayed her family's trust couldn't do it again. I'm not the same person who planned to destroy you 2 years ago. I work now at a women's shelter, helping other women who have made destructive choices learn to rebuild their lives. I live simply in a small apartment with no desire for the excitement or drama that once seemed so appealing. I have learned to find peace in being alone with myself, something I was never able to do before. I don't expect anything from you, Ray. I don't expect forgiveness, reconciliation, or even acknowledgement of this letter. I am writing because I needed you to know that the person who hurt you and our children is gone. Whether the person who remains is worthy of anything more than your indifference is not for me to judge. I hope you and the children have found happiness. I hope the life you've built without me is everything our family could have been if I had been strong enough to choose love over selfishness. With respect and genuine remorse, Brenda. Ray read the letter twice, then set it on his desk and stared out the window at the treehouse illuminated by the back porch light. The woman who had written this letter seemed like a different person from the one who had destroyed Danny's project and planned to frame Ray for domestic violence. But was the change real, or was this simply a more sophisticated form of manipulation? The next morning, Ray showed the letter to Lisa over coffee at their usual diner. "What do you think?" he asked after she'd read it. Lisa folded the letter carefully and handed it back. "I think she sounds different, more self-aware, less focused on what she wants, and more focused on taking responsibility for what she did. But you know as well as I do that people can learn to say the right things without really changing. The question is whether you're willing to take the risk of finding out which this is." Ray tucked the letter into his jacket pocket. "What would you do?" Lisa smiled. "I'd probably do exactly what you're going to do. Proceed with extreme caution, protect your children above all else, and see if her actions match her words over time." That evening, Ray shared the letter with Danny and Lily. Both children read it carefully, their faces showing a mixture of emotions. "She sounds different," Lily observed. "Sadder, but also, I don't know, more real." Danny was more skeptical. "It's a nice letter, Dad, but letters are just words. What matters is what someone does." Ray nodded. "What do you both think about me responding to her?" Lily looked up hopefully. "Are you going to?" "I'm considering it, but I want to know how you two feel about that." Danny was quiet for a long moment. I think it's okay to acknowledge that she's trying to change, but I don't think we should make it easy for her. She needs to prove that she's really different, not just sorry." "And how would she do that?" "By staying away from us until she's really sure she's changed. By building a life that shows she's learned from her mistakes. By not asking for anything from us while she's still figuring out who she wants to be." Ray looked at his son with pride. Danny had learned to be both compassionate and wise, to leave room for the possibility of change while protecting himself from further harm. 3 days later, Ray wrote his response. "Brenda, I received your letter and appreciate the thought you put into it. Your words suggest that you have gained insight into the person you were and the choices you made. I hope that insight leads to lasting change. Danny and Lily are both doing well. They are strong, resilient young people who have learned valuable lessons about trust, loyalty, and the importance of consistency between words and actions. They know that their mother's failures don't define them, and they are building lives based on integrity and genuine care for others. I cannot offer you forgiveness that is not mine to give or withhold, but rather something that may or may not develop naturally over time based on how you choose to live your life going forward. What I can offer is indifference to your past and cautious hope for your future. If your change is real, if you have truly become someone who puts others' well-being ahead of your own desires, then you have my respect for doing the hard work of transformation. If this is simply a more sophisticated attempt at manipulation, then you will find that I am no more susceptible to it now than I was before. Live well, Brenda. Build a life that reflects the person you claim to have become. And if, years from now, your actions have consistently matched the sentiment in your letter, perhaps we can have a different kind of conversation. Ray. Ray sealed the letter and mailed it that same day. As he drove home, he felt something he hadn't experienced in over 2 years, a sense of closure. That evening, as the family sat around the dinner table, Lily asked a question that surprised him. Daddy, do you think you've changed since everything happened with Mommy? Ray considered the question carefully. Yes, sweetheart. I think I have. Ow! I became harder, more suspicious, less willing to trust people. In some ways, that was necessary to protect our family. But in other ways, it made me less than I wanted to be. Danny looked up from his plate. Do you think that was wrong? Ray met his son's eyes. I think it was necessary at the time. But I also think it's time to find a balance between protecting ourselves and remaining open to the possibility that people can change. 6 months later, Ray received a Christmas card for Brenda. Inside was a simple message. Thank you for your letter. I am still working to become someone worthy of the family I lost. I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas. There was no return address, no request for contact, no expectation of response. It was simply acknowledgement of the season and a reaffirmation of her commitment to change. Ray showed the card to Danny and Lily, who read it without comment. Then Lily did something that surprised him. She took the card and placed it on the mantel next to the other Christmas cards they'd received. She's still our mother, Lily explained when Ray raised an eyebrow. Even if she's not part of our family anymore. That night, as Ray tucked his daughter into bed, she asked him one final question that would stay with him for years to come. Daddy, if someone really changes, if they become a completely different person than they were when they hurt you, do you think they deserve a chance to show that they're different? Ray looked down at his 9-year-old daughter, this child who had somehow maintained her capacity for hope despite everything she'd witnessed. I think, sweetheart, that everyone deserves the chance to become better than they were. But I also think that the people they hurt have the right to protect themselves while that person is learning to change. And most importantly, I think actions matter more than words, and it takes a long time to prove that change is real. Lily nodded solemnly. So maybe someday, if Mommy really is different, we could be friends? Not a family again, but not enemies either. Ray kissed his daughter's forehead. Maybe, Lily. Maybe. As Ray turned off the lights and closed Lily's door, he realized that his children had taught him something profound about the nature of justice, mercy, and the complexity of human relationships. They had learned to set boundaries without building walls, to protect themselves without losing their capacity for compassion, to hope for the best while preparing for the worst. Ray walked out to the backyard and looked up at the treehouse, this symbol of his family's resilience and ability to rebuild. The structure was strong, beautiful, and built to last. But more importantly, it had been built with love, patience, and the wisdom that comes from learning hard lessons about trust and betrayal. In the end, Ray realized that was the best revenge of all, not the destruction of his enemies, but the construction of something better from the ruins they had left behind. His children were growing into remarkable human beings. His own character had been tested and refined, and their family had emerged stronger from the crucible of betrayal. Brenda and Trevor had tried to destroy Detective Ray Holloway and his family. Instead, they had forged them into something unbreakable. As Ray walked back toward his house, he felt the cold calculation that had driven him for so long finally beginning to thaw. Perhaps it was time to become someone new again, Not the naively trusting man he'd been before Brenda's betrayal, and not the coldly vengeful man he'd become afterward, but someone who combined the wisdom of both experiences. Someone who could protect his family without losing his soul. Someone who could demand justice without abandoning mercy. Someone who could learn from betrayal without being consumed by it. Ray Holloway had survived the destruction of his marriage, the betrayal of his trust, and the systematic assault on everything he'd built. More than that, he had emerged from the experience as a better father, a stronger man, and a wiser human being. The treehouse stood as testament to his family's resilience. But the man who looked up at it that night was testament to something even more important: the human capacity to be transformed by suffering without being destroyed by it. The reckoning was complete. The man who remained was exactly who he chose to be. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Facade. Rick Donovan stood at his kitchen window, watching his twin daughters Ashley and Emma play soccer in the backyard of their suburban Phoenix home. At 42, he had built what everyone considered the perfect life. His successful security consulting firm specialized in personal protection for high-profile clients, a business born from his 15 years as a Special Forces operative. The scars on his hands told stories he never shared at neighborhood barbecues. His wife Tricia emerged from the house, her auburn hair catching the Arizona sun. At 38, she maintained the same athletic build that had caught his eye 12 years ago at a medical conference. She worked as a physician's assistant at Desert Ridge Medical Center, a job she claimed fulfilled her desire to help people. Rick had always admired her dedication, often working late shifts and weekend emergencies. "Daddy, watch this," Ashley called out, attempting an elaborate soccer trick that sent the ball careening into their neighbor's yard. Rick chuckled, remembering his own childhood attempts to impress his father, a man who rarely noticed anything beyond his bourbon bottle. "I have to run to the office," Tricia said, checking her phone. "Dr. Vasquez needs me to prep some files for Monday's surgery schedule." She pecked Rick's cheek with the mechanical precision of a married routine. Rick nodded, accustomed to her weekend work demands. Dr. Antonio Vasquez was the head of cardiothoracic surgery, a position that apparently required constant attention from his staff. In the 12 years Rick had known Tricia, she'd worked under 3 different doctors, but none had demanded as much of her time as Vasquez had in the past 6 years. As Tricia's BMW pulled out of the driveway, Rick noticed their neighbor Mrs. Patterson quickly averting her gaze from her garden. The elderly woman had lived next door for over 20 years, and Rick had caught her watching Tricia leave on numerous weekends with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. He filed the observation away, old habits from his military days, where noticing details could mean the difference between life and death. That evening, during their weekly family dinner at Romano's Italian restaurant, Rick observed his daughters with the analytical eye that had made him successful in his security business. Ashley, the more outgoing twin, gesticulated wildly while telling a story about her math teacher. Emma, quieter and more thoughtful, picked at her spaghetti with an almost artistic precision. "You know," Tricia said, twirling her fork in her pasta, "the girls are getting so good at Italian pronunciation. Must be all those cooking shows we watch." Rick raised an eyebrow. He couldn't recall watching any Italian cooking shows, but then again, his work often kept him away during the girls' television time. What struck him as odd was how naturally both daughters pronounced words like antipasto and prosciutto, pronunciation that seemed almost instinctive rather than learned from television. Later that night, after putting the girls to bed, Rick found Tricia in their home office, typing rapidly on her laptop. She quickly minimized the screen when he entered. "Work emails," she explained, but Rick caught a glimpse of what looked like a message thread rather than medical documents. The sender's name began with Anton before disappearing from view. "Everything okay?" Rick asked, settling into his reading chair with a military biography. "Of course. Just coordinating some patient transfers with Dr. Vasquez. You know how demanding cardiac surgery schedules can be." Rick nodded, but something nagged at him. In all his years of marriage, Tricia had never been secretive about her work. She used to share stories about difficult cases and challenging procedures. Lately, however, her work discussions had become vague and evasive. Over the following weeks, Rick began noticing small inconsistencies. Tricia claimed to be at weekend conferences that he couldn't find listed online. Her cell phone received calls at odd hours, calls she would answer in hushed tones before stepping outside. Most peculiar were the Italian phrases that occasionally slipped into her speech, phrases that seemed too fluent for someone who claimed to have learned them from cooking shows. The turning point came during a school conference for the twins. Their teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, mentioned how Ashley had written an excellent essay about Italian family traditions. "It's wonderful how connected they feel to their heritage," Mrs. Rodriguez said with a warm smile. Ashley wrote about Sunday dinners with extended family and traditional Italian celebrations. Such vivid details for children who haven't traveled much. Rick and Tricia exchanged glances. Neither had Italian heritage. Rick's family was Irish-German and Tricia's was Polish-English. When Rick asked Ashley about the essay later, she shrugged and said she'd made it up, but her description of Italian family gatherings contained details too specific for pure imagination. That night, Rick lay awake listening to Tricia's steady breathing beside him. His mind cataloged every suspicious moment from the past months. The secretive phone calls, the unexplained knowledge of Italian customs, the growing distance in their marriage, and the way his daughters seemed to possess cultural knowledge they couldn't have learned at home. A cold realization began forming in his mind, one that would shatter the carefully constructed world he thought he knew. Chapter 2. Unraveling Threads. The idea came to Rick during a routine security consultation with a Phoenix businessman who'd received threatening letters. As Rick analyzed the handwriting and paper quality, his client mentioned using DNA testing to verify the authenticity of threatening correspondence. "Amazing what they can determine nowadays," the client had said. "Heritage, health markers, even behavioral tendencies. My ex-wife used one of those ancestry kits and discovered she was 20% Italian. Changed her whole identity overnight." That evening, Rick ordered 2 ancestry DNA kits online, using his business credit card to avoid detection. When they arrived 3 days later, he carefully collected samples from Ashley and Emma during their morning routine, telling them it was for a school science project about genetics. The waiting period felt like an eternity. Rick threw himself into work, taking on additional security contracts that kept him away from home. The distance served a dual purpose. It gave him space to think clearly and provided alibis for his investigation. During this time, Rick began employing skills he'd learned in Special Forces intelligence gathering. He installed discrete monitoring software on the family computer and placed a GPS tracker in Tricia's car, equipment he ostensibly used for client security assessments. What he discovered made his blood run cold. Tricia's computer revealed a treasure trove of deleted emails and chat logs. Using recovery software, Rick uncovered months of correspondence with Dr. Antonio Vasquez that had nothing to do with medical procedures. The messages were filled with intimate details, future plans, and discussions about the girls that suggested a familiarity beyond professional courtesy. The GPS data showed that Tricia's weekend work emergencies took her to a luxury apartment complex on the other side of Phoenix, an address that, according to Rick's background check, belonged to Dr. Vasquez. The timestamps revealed that she often spent entire afternoons there, far longer than any medical consultation would require. But the most damning evidence came from a recovered chat log dated 3 months earlier. Antonio_V, the girls look more like me every day. Emma has my mother's eyes. Tricia Med, I know. Sometimes I worry Rick will notice. Ashley asked me yesterday why she looks different from him. Antonio_V, they're old enough to understand now. Maybe it's time to tell them about their real father. Tricia Med, not yet. I need more time to plan our transition. Rick's military background makes him unpredictable. Rick read the exchange 3 times before the full implications sank in. His daughters, the children he'd raised, coached, and loved unconditionally for 10 years, weren't his biological offspring. The DNA results would only confirm what this conversation had already revealed. When the ancestry results arrived 2 weeks later, Rick opened them alone in his office. The report showed Ashley and Emma were 47% Italian, 23% Spanish, and 18% Greek, a genetic profile that matched perfectly with someone of Dr. Vasquez's background. There was no trace of the Irish-German heritage that defined Rick's own genetic makeup. That night, Rick sat in his study with a glass of whiskey, staring at the DNA reports. His military training had taught him to compartmentalize emotions during crisis situations, but this betrayal cut deeper than any enemy fire he'd faced overseas. The woman he'd trusted with his life had been living a lie for over a decade, and his own daughters were unwitting participants in an elaborate deception. The next morning brought an unexpected revelation. Mrs. Patterson knocked on his door with a casserole and an uncomfortable expression. "Rick, I've been wrestling with whether to say anything," she began, wringing her hands nervously. "But after seeing you look so troubled lately, I think you deserve to know." She revealed that she'd witnessed Tricia leaving the house with the girls on numerous occasions, telling them they were visiting Uncle Tony for special family dinners. The girls would return hours later, chattering excitedly about their Italian family and the wonderful food they'd shared. "Your mother-in-law was here last month," Mrs. Patterson continued. She mentioned how proud she was that Tricia had finally found happiness with her real family. When I asked what she meant, she just smiled and said the girls deserved to know their heritage. Rick felt the final pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Not only had Tricia been conducting a long-term affair, but she'd been systematically introducing his daughters to their biological father under the guise of cultural education. His own family had been complicit in the deception, treating him like an outsider in his own life. That evening, Rick made a decision that would have horrified the man he'd been just months earlier. He began planning not just to expose the betrayal, but to exact a revenge so complete that none of the perpetrators would recover. His military training had taught him that successful operations required patience, planning, and the element of surprise. Tricia had declared war on his life without him knowing. Now Rick would respond with the full arsenal of skills he'd acquired in 15 years of military service. The rules of engagement had changed, and mercy was no longer an option. Chapter 3: The Family Conspiracy. Rick's investigation expanded beyond Tricia and Dr. Vasquez to include his own family members. Using techniques learned in military intelligence, he began systematically gathering evidence of the broader conspiracy that had kept him ignorant for 6 years. His first target was his mother-in-law, Linda. Rick installed surveillance equipment in her home during a routine visit, hidden among the security upgrades he offered to install for her safety. The audio recordings revealed weekly phone calls with Tricia where they discussed Antonio's relationship with the girls and strategies for keeping Rick uninformed. He's starting to ask questions about the girls' Italian interests. Tricia's voice came through clearly on one recording. "Mom, what if he figures it out?" "Honey, men see what they want to see," Linda replied. Rick's too busy with his work to pay attention to details. Besides, the girls are happier now that they know their real father. "You can't keep living this lie forever." "I know. Antonio wants me to file for divorce, but I need to secure the assets first." Rick's business is worth more than he realizes. The conversation revealed that Linda had been actively encouraging the affair, viewing Dr. Vasquez as a better provider and father figure than Rick. She'd helped orchestrate the weekend visits and even provided alibis when Rick became suspicious. Even more shocking was the discovery that Rick's own brother Mike knew about the situation. Hidden cameras in Mike's garage captured a conversation between him and their father, Frank, discussing Rick's blindness to his wife's affair. "Poor Rick," Mike said while working on his motorcycle. "Always thought he was the smart one in the family. Can't even see that his wife's been playing house with another man for years." Frank, nursing a beer, laughed bitterly. "Maybe it'll teach him some humility." always acting like he's better than us with his fancy military career and his successful business. Let him find out the hard way that his perfect family is a joke. Those girls don't even look like him, Mike continued. Anyone with eyes can see they're Vasquez's kids. Trisha's got brass, I'll give her that. Living off Rick's money while raising another man's children. The recordings revealed that his family had not only known about the affair, but had actively enjoyed watching Rick unknowingly support another man's family. They viewed his ignorance as comeuppance for his success and military achievements, treating his pain as entertainment. Rick's investigation into Dr. Vasquez revealed additional disturbing information. The doctor had been systematically isolating Rick from his daughters, gradually positioning himself as their primary father figure. Security footage from the girls' school showed Vasquez attending Ashley's science fair and Emma's art exhibition, events Rick had missed due to work commitments that Trisha had claimed were mandatory. A conversation recorded in Vasquez's apartment revealed the full scope of their plan. The transition needs to be gradual, Vasquez told Trisha during one of their weekend meetings. The girls already see me as family. Once Rick is out of the picture, we can formalize our relationship and I can legally adopt them. What about his business? Trisha asked. The security firm is worth at least $2 million. I'm entitled to half in a divorce. We'll need to be careful about the evidence trail. If Rick discovers the truth before we're ready, his military background could make him dangerous. I've seen what men like him can do when they feel cornered. Rick realized that he wasn't just dealing with a simple affair. This was a coordinated effort to systematically remove him from his own life while appropriating everything he'd worked to build. His wife, her lover, and his own family had conspired to steal his daughters, his money, and his identity as a father. The final revelation came through social media surveillance. Rick discovered that Vasquez had been posting photos of his family on a private Instagram account, showing himself with Trisha and the girls at restaurants, parks, and family gatherings that Rick had never known about. The captions refer to Ashley and Emma as "my daughters" and describe building a real family together. One particularly damaging post showed the four of them at a father-daughter dance at the girls' school, an event Rick thought had been canceled due to a scheduling conflict. Trisha had lied about the cancellation to ensure Vasquez could attend as their father figure. As Rick compiled his evidence, he began formulating a revenge plan that would systematically destroy every person who had betrayed him. His military training had taught him that the most effective attacks targeted multiple objectives simultaneously, creating chaos and preventing coordinated resistance. Trisha wanted a divorce and half his assets. She would discover that his business had been restructured in ways that left her with nothing. Vasquez wanted to play father to Rick's daughters. He would learn that some men fight back with lethal precision. His family wanted to enjoy his humiliation. They would find themselves facing consequences they never imagined. The old Rick Donovan, the trusting husband and father, was dead. In his place stood a predator who had been trained by the world's most elite military forces. The people who had betrayed him were about to discover what happened when you declared war on someone who had spent 15 years learning how to destroy enemies without leaving evidence behind. The game was about to begin, and Rick held all the advantages they didn't know existed. Chapter 4. The Predator Awakens. Rick spent the next 2 weeks conducting what he privately termed pre-operational reconnaissance. His military background had taught him that successful missions required intimate knowledge of enemy capabilities, weaknesses, and operational patterns. Each target in his revenge plan would face consequences tailored to their specific vulnerabilities. Dr. Antonio Vasquez proved surprisingly easy to research. Rick discovered that the cardiac surgeon had a carefully cultivated public image built on charitable work and medical excellence. He served on the board of 3 medical foundations, had published numerous research papers, and maintained an active social media presence, showcasing his humanitarian efforts. More importantly, Vasquez's professional reputation was his most valuable asset, one that could be systematically destroyed with the right approach. Rick's investigation revealed that Vasquez had been taking dangerous shortcuts in his personal life. The doctor's apartment lease was in his ex-wife's name to hide assets during their divorce proceedings. His medical malpractice insurance had lapsed due to unpaid premiums, a detail hidden from the hospital administration. Most damaging of all, Vasquez had been performing unlicensed cosmetic procedures for cash payments at a private clinic to fund his lavish lifestyle. Trisha's vulnerabilities were different, but equally exploitable. Rick discovered that his wife had been siphoning money from their joint accounts to support her secret life with Vasquez. She'd taken out credit cards in both their names, accumulating over $80,000 in debt for purchases that never appeared in their household. Her medical assistant certification was also under review due to complaints about unprofessional conduct. Complaints that had been filed by patients who suspected she was sharing confidential information with unauthorized individuals. Rick's own family presented the most personal targets for his revenge. His brother Mike's motorcycle repair shop was operating without proper licensing, and he'd been avoiding tax payments for 3 years. Their father, Frank, had been collecting disability benefits while secretly working construction jobs for cash. His mother-in-law, Linda, had been embezzling from the charity organization where she volunteered, skimming funds meant for homeless veterans. But Rick's most devastating discovery concerned his daughter's manipulation. Hidden cameras revealed that Ashley and Emma had been coached to view Rick as a temporary figure in their lives. Vasquez had been telling them stories about their real family heritage and promising them a life in Italy once their situation was resolved. The girls, at ages 10, were being systematically alienated from the only father they'd ever known. Rick's transformation into a predator was methodical and terrifying. He began implementing operational security measures that would have impressed his former commanding officers. He rented a secure storage unit using false identification, where he established a command center complete with surveillance equipment, financial records, and detailed dossiers on each target. His first strategic move involved restructuring his business assets. Rick's security consulting firm was quietly reorganized through a series of shell companies and offshore accounts, effectively removing Trisha's claim to marital property. He transferred ownership to a Cayman Islands corporation controlled by a trust that existed only on paper, with himself listed as an employee rather than owner. Simultaneously, Rick began building leverage against each conspirator. He established contact with Vasquez's ex-wife through a private investigator, feeding her information about hidden assets and illegal activities that would benefit her ongoing legal battles. He documented Mike's tax evasion and prepared anonymous reports for the IRS. He compiled evidence of Linda's embezzlement and prepared to destroy her reputation in the veteran community she claimed to serve. The psychological warfare began subtly. Rick started leaving small signs that he knew more than he was admitting. He casually mentioned meeting Dr. Vasquez at a medical conference that didn't exist, watching Trisha's face carefully for reactions. He began asking the girls specific questions about their cultural education, noting how they deflected or changed subjects when discussing their weekends with Uncle Tony. His military training had taught him that psychological pressure could be more effective than direct confrontation. Rick wanted his targets to feel the walls closing in before they understood what was happening. Fear and paranoia would make them desperate, leading to mistakes that would justify his ultimate revenge. The turning point came when Rick discovered that Vasquez had been videotaping his encounters with Trisha and storing the recordings on a cloud server. The doctor's arrogance had provided Rick with blackmail material that could destroy both his targets simultaneously. More importantly, the timestamps on these recordings proved that the affair had been ongoing during periods when Vasquez was supposed to be performing emergency surgeries, potentially endangering patients' lives. Rick realized that he now possessed enough evidence to destroy everyone who had betrayed him through legal channels alone. But his anger demanded something more personal and devastating than simple exposure. These people had stolen 6 years of his life and turned his daughters against him. They deserved consequences that matched the magnitude of their betrayal. As Rick finalized his revenge plan, he felt a cold satisfaction settle over him. The predatory instincts that had kept him alive through multiple combat deployments were fully awakened now. His targets had made the fatal error of underestimating their enemy, assuming that a betrayed husband would respond with predictable emotional reactions. Instead, They would face the calculated wrath of a man trained to eliminate threats with surgical precision. The old Rick Donovan had been destroyed by their betrayal. What remained was something far more dangerous. A predator who understood exactly how to dismantle lies as methodically as they had dismantled his. Chapter 5. The Web Titans. Rick initiated his revenge operation on a Tuesday morning that his targets would later remember as the day their worlds began collapsing. His plan unfolded across multiple fronts simultaneously, creating chaos that prevented any coordinated response from the conspirators. The first strike targeted Dr. Vasquez's professional reputation. Rick had discovered that the doctor was scheduled to perform a high-profile heart surgery on a prominent Phoenix businessman's wife. Using skills learned in psychological operations, Rick created a series of anonymous tips to the hospital's medical review board, timing their delivery for maximum impact. The tips revealed Vasquez's lapsed malpractice insurance, his unlicensed cosmetic procedures, and most damaging of all, evidence that he'd been intoxicated during previous surgeries. Rick had obtained this last piece of information through careful surveillance of Vasquez's apartment, documenting his heavy drinking sessions with Tricia the night before scheduled procedures. Within hours, the hospital administration placed Vasquez on immediate suspension pending investigation. The prestigious surgery was reassigned to another doctor, and whispers began circulating through the medical community about the Vasquez situation. Rick ensured that local medical gossip networks received carefully leaked information about the doctor's unprofessional conduct. Simultaneously, Rick activated his psychological warfare against Tricia. He began leaving subtle evidence that he knew about her deception. A receipt for Vasquez's apartment complex left on her dresser, a printout of the Italian restaurant where she'd taken the girls for cultural education, and most unnerving of all, a photo of her car parked outside Vasquez's building with a timestamp showing her emergency work alibi was false. Tricia's paranoia escalated quickly. Rick watched with cold satisfaction as she became increasingly agitated, checking her phone obsessively and jumping at unexpected sounds. Her secretive behavior intensified, but now it stemmed from fear rather than deception. She began questioning whether her conversations were being monitored and started communicating with Vasquez only through encrypted messaging apps. The pressure on Vasquez increased when his ex-wife's attorney received an anonymous package containing evidence of hidden assets and illegal income. The package included bank statements from the unlicensed cosmetic procedures, photographs of expensive purchases made during their marriage separation, and documentation proving that the apartment where he entertained Tricia was actually owned through a shell company designed to hide marital assets. Within a week, Vasquez was facing a renewed legal challenge from his ex-wife, seeking additional alimony and asset division. His attempt to hide wealth during their divorce proceedings now exposed him to perjury charges and professional sanctions. The financial pressure forced him to liquidate investments at substantial losses, creating a cascade of additional legal problems. Rick's campaign against his own family was equally systematic and brutal. His brother Mike received an IRS audit notice triggered by Rick's anonymous submission of detailed tax records. The documentation included photographs of Mike performing cash jobs, deposit records showing unreported income, and testimony from customers willing to confirm under-the-table payments. Frank faced the termination of his disability benefits after investigators received evidence of his construction work. Rick had compiled months of surveillance footage showing his father performing physical labor while claiming debilitating injuries. The investigation would not only end his benefits, but potentially result in criminal charges for fraud. Linda's embezzlement from the veteran charity was exposed through a carefully orchestrated leak to a local investigative reporter. Rick provided evidence showing that money donated for homeless veterans had been diverted to Linda's personal accounts, with detailed records of how she'd manipulated the charity's financial systems. The story broke during a week when the charity was conducting its annual fundraising drive, maximizing the public relations damage. The most psychologically devastating aspect of Rick's plan targeted the relationship between Vasquez and his daughters. Using audio equipment planted in Vasquez's apartment, Rick recorded conversations where the doctor expressed frustration about being trapped with another man's family and complained about the financial burden of supporting children who weren't legally his responsibility. Rick edited these recordings to highlight Vasquez's most callous statements about Ashley and Emma, then anonymously sent them to Trisha's phone from an untraceable number. The accompanying message was simple. This is what your boyfriend really thinks about your daughters. Trisha's confrontation with Vasquez about the recordings created exactly the discord Rick had hoped for. Under pressure from multiple fronts, the hospital investigation, legal challenges, and financial stress, Vasquez's facade of caring stepfather began cracking. His true nature emerged during heated arguments that Rick monitored through planted surveillance equipment. "I never signed up to be trapped with your baggage," Vasquez shouted during one recorded argument. "I wanted you, not your kids and your crazy ex-husband. This whole situation is becoming too dangerous. Those are your daughters." Trisha screamed back. "You can't just abandon them when things get complicated." "They're not mine legally," Vasquez replied coldly. "And if Rick finds out the truth, I'm not going to prison for some affair that got out of hand." Rick felt grim satisfaction as he listened to the relationship disintegrating under pressure. His strategy of applying stress to multiple pressure points simultaneously was working exactly as planned. The conspirators were turning against each other, making mistakes that would accelerate their destruction. The psychological toll on his targets was becoming visible. Trisha had lost weight and developed nervous habits that her colleagues at work began noticing. Vasquez's surgical privileges remained suspended while the investigation expanded, and other hospitals were reluctant to consider him for positions while ethical questions remained unanswered. Rick's family members found themselves facing financial ruin and potential criminal charges, all stemming from their decision to mock and betray him. The poetic justice of their situation wasn't lost on Rick. People who had enjoyed his humiliation were now experiencing their own very public disgrace. As the web of consequences tightened around his targets, Rick began preparing for the final phase of his revenge. The systematic destruction of their lives had been satisfying, but his ultimate goal required a more personal and permanent resolution. The people who had stolen 6 years of his life were about to discover that some betrayals carry consequences that last forever. Chapter 6. Checkmate Approaches. 3 months into Rick's systematic campaign of destruction, his targets were beginning to understand that their misfortunes weren't coincidental. The simultaneous collapse of their financial security, professional reputations, and personal relationships suggested a coordinated attack, but they couldn't identify the source or predict the next assault. Dr. Vasquez's situation had deteriorated beyond recovery. The hospital investigation revealed a pattern of professional misconduct that extended beyond Rick's planted evidence to include genuine ethical violations that previous administrators had overlooked. His unlicensed cosmetic procedures had resulted in complications for several patients who were now filing malpractice lawsuits. Without insurance coverage, Vasquez faced personal bankruptcy and potential criminal charges. Rick escalated the pressure by introducing a new element to Vasquez's troubles. Using contacts from his security consulting business, Rick arranged for the doctor to receive anonymous threats that appeared to come from disgruntled patients. The threats were carefully crafted to seem genuine while remaining legally protected speech, designed to create paranoia without crossing into criminal territory. Vasquez's response to these perceived threats revealed his true character to Trisha and the girls. Instead of protecting the family he claimed to love, he became increasingly distant and paranoid. He installed security systems in his apartment, carried pepper spray, and began avoiding public appearances with Trisha and the children. "I think someone is targeting me," he told Trisha during a conversation Rick monitored through planted surveillance equipment. "Maybe we should take a break from seeing each other until this situation resolves." "You're abandoning us when we need you most," Trisha replied, her voice breaking with exhaustion and stress. "The girls keep asking why Uncle Tony doesn't visit anymore." "It's not abandonment, it's practical," Vasquez said coldly. "I can't protect you if I'm dealing with threats against my own safety. Your husband might be involved in this somehow." Rick felt deep satisfaction hearing Vasquez's paranoia correctly identify the true source of his problems while remaining powerless to prove it. The doctor's abandonment of Trisha and the girls during their crisis demonstrated exactly the kind of character Rick had suspected lay beneath his caring facade. Trisha's own situation became increasingly desperate as the financial pressure mounted. The credit card debt she'd accumulated to support her secret life with Vasquez was now consuming most of their household income. Her attempts to access Rick's business accounts revealed that his assets had been restructured in ways that left her without financial access or legal recourse. Rick watched with cold amusement as Trisha frantically tried to understand the complex web of trusts and offshore entities that now controlled his wealth. Her attempts to hire attorneys were frustrated by her inability to pay substantial retainer fees, and the few lawyers willing to work on contingency became discouraged when they discovered the sophistication of Rick's asset protection strategies. The psychological toll on his daughters was the most complex aspect of Rick's revenge. Ashley and Emma had begun asking uncomfortable questions about the adults in their lives. Uncle Tony's absence was difficult to explain, especially when it coincided with their mother's increasing anxiety and erratic behavior. Rick carefully monitored the girls' emotional state, ensuring that his revenge didn't cause them permanent psychological damage while still achieving his objectives. He began subtly positioning himself as their only stable parental figure, the one person who remained consistently present and reliable while their mother's world collapsed around her. "Daddy, why does Mommy cry so much lately?" Emma asked during one of their bedtime conversations. "Sometimes adults have problems they need to work through," Rick replied, choosing his words carefully. "The important thing is that I'll always be here for you and Ashley, no matter what happens." The irony wasn't lost on Rick that his daughters were turning to him for comfort during a crisis he had orchestrated. But their growing reliance on him served his ultimate purpose, establishing himself as their primary parent before revealing the truth about their biological origins. Rick's campaign against his extended family was reaching its climax. Mike's tax problems had escalated into criminal charges when investigators discovered that his unreported income exceeded felony thresholds. Frank faced not only the loss of his disability benefits, but potential prosecution for fraud. Linda's embezzlement from the Veterans Charity had become a local scandal that destroyed her social standing and potentially exposed her to significant jail time. Each family member had tried to contact Rick for help, not realizing that he was the architect of their destruction. Their assumption that family loyalty would compel him to provide legal assistance or financial support revealed how little they understood about the man they had betrayed. "Rick, you have to help me," Mike pleaded during a phone call that Rick recorded for future evidence. "I know we've had our differences, but I'm facing serious jail time here. I need a good lawyer." "I'm sorry to hear about your troubles," Rick replied with carefully practiced sympathy. "But my business is struggling right now, and I can't afford to take on additional financial obligations." It was a lie, of course. Rick's business was thriving under its new corporate structure, but he wanted Mike to experience the same sense of abandonment that Rick had felt when he discovered his family's betrayal. As the final phase of his plan approached, Rick began making preparations for a confrontation that would force all the conspirators to face the consequences of their actions simultaneously. He had systematically destroyed their financial security, professional reputations, and personal relationships. Now it was time to reveal the scope of his knowledge and the futility of their attempts to rebuild their lives. The chess game was approaching checkmate, and Rick's opponents were finally beginning to understand that they had never been playing against an equal. They had betrayed a man trained in psychological warfare, asset protection, and strategic planning by elite military forces. Their amateur attempts at deception and manipulation had been no match for professional-level skills in revenge. The endgame would be swift, brutal, and final. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. Rick chose a Saturday evening in October for his final confrontation, timing it to coincide with what should have been a family celebration. Ashley and Emma were at a sleepover with friends, safely removed from what was about to unfold. Trisha believed Rick was attending a business conference in Las Vegas, providing the perfect opportunity for her planned reconciliation dinner with Dr. Vasquez. Instead of traveling to Nevada, Rick positioned himself in the surveillance command center he'd established in a rented office space near their neighborhood. Multiple screens displayed live feeds from cameras he'd installed throughout their house, Vasquez's apartment, and his family members' homes. Tonight, all the conspirators would learn the true cost of their betrayal. The first revelation came at 6 p.m. when Trisha arrived at Vasquez's apartment, carrying a bottle of expensive wine and wearing the black dress Rick had bought her for their 10th wedding anniversary. She intended to convince Vasquez to resume their relationship and finalize plans for divorcing Rick. Instead, she found a professionally printed dossier waiting on his kitchen counter. The dossier contained everything. DNA test results proving Ashley and Emma were Vasquez's biological children, detailed financial records of Trisha's embezzlement from their joint accounts, transcripts of recorded conversations between all the conspirators, and most devastating of all, the full scope of Rick's knowledge about their 6-year deception. Rick watched through hidden cameras as Trisha's face went white reading the documentation. She called Vasquez immediately, her voice panicked and shrill. "Tony, you need to get home right now. Rick knows everything. Everything." Vasquez was at a medical conference in San Diego, attempting to rebuild his professional reputation while his Phoenix career crumbled. The call came as he was networking with potential employers, destroying his concentration and revealing the personal crisis that made him unemployable in their community. "What do you mean he knows everything?" Vasquez demanded, stepping away from the conference reception into a hotel corridor. "DNA tests, financial records, recordings of our conversations. It's all here, printed out like some kind of legal brief. How could he have gotten recordings of our private conversations?" Vasquez's blood ran cold as he realized the implications. If Rick had access to their private conversations, he'd been under surveillance for months or possibly years. The anonymous threats, the hospital investigation, the legal troubles with his ex-wife, all of it had been orchestrated by a man they'd underestimated completely. "Listen to me carefully," Vasquez said, his medical training helping him focus despite the crisis. "Don't touch anything else in the apartment. Get out immediately and go home. We need to assume everything we say and do is being monitored." But Rick wasn't finished with his revelation. As Trisha prepared to leave Vasquez's apartment, she received a text message from an unknown number. "Check your email. Your family is waiting." The email contained video files that made Trisha's knees buckle. Security footage showed her entering Vasquez's apartment, building dozens of times over the past year. Audio recordings captured her discussing divorce strategy and asset division with her mother. Most damaging of all, recordings of Vasquez referring to Ashley and Emma as "my daughters" and discussing plans to legally adopt them after Rick was out of the picture. Simultaneously, Rick's family members received their own personalized packages of evidence. Mike opened his front door to find a box containing IRS audit documents, surveillance photographs of his cash jobs, and a note reading, "Your brother always paid attention to details. You should have remembered that." Frank's package included copies of his disability fraud documentation alongside photographs of him performing construction work. The accompanying note was more personal. "You raised me to believe family loyalty mattered. Thank you for teaching me what betrayal looks like." Linda's evidence packet was delivered to her home during her weekly bridge club meeting, ensuring maximum social embarrassment. Her friends watched in horror as she opened documents proving her embezzlement for veteran charities, along with recorded conversations where she mocked Rick's ignorance about his wife's affair. The psychological impact of simultaneous exposure created exactly the chaos Rick had planned. Each conspirator realized that their betrayal hadn't just been discovered. It had been documented with professional thoroughness over an extended period. The scope of evidence suggested resources and capabilities they hadn't imagined Rick possessed. Vasquez attempted to return to Phoenix immediately, but Rick had anticipated this response. Anonymous tips to airport security about suspicious behavior by a man under medical investigation resulted in enhanced screening procedures that delayed his flight by hours. By the time he reached Phoenix, the final phase of Rick's plan was already in motion. Trisha arrived home to find Rick waiting in their living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand and multiple file folders arranged on a coffee table. His demeanor was completely calm, almost relaxed, which terrified her more than anger would have. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "DNA results came back 3 months ago," Rick replied conversationally. "But I suspected something was wrong for over a year." "You're not very good at deception, Tricia." "None of you are. What do you want?" Tricia asked, sinking into the chair across from him. Rick's smile was cold and predatory. "I want you to understand that everything you've built your life around for the past 6 years no longer exists. Vasquez's medical career is finished. Your financial security is gone. Your support network has been systematically destroyed. And most importantly, you're going to discover what happens when you declare war on someone who actually knows how to fight." Tricia tried to speak, but Rick continued with ruthless precision. "The girls will learn the truth about their parentage, but they'll learn it from me in a context that helps them understand why their mother can't be trusted. You'll have visitation rights, assuming you can afford legal representation and don't face criminal charges for embezzlement. You can't take my daughters away from me," Tricia said, desperation breaking through her shock. "I'm not taking them away," Rick replied with chilling calm. "I'm simply ensuring they understand which parent has been lying to them for their entire lives and which parent can provide them with stability and security. Children are remarkably adaptable when given proper guidance." The conversation was interrupted by Vasquez's arrival, his key still working because Rick wanted this final confrontation to include all the primary conspirators. The doctor burst through the front door expecting to find Tricia in crisis, instead discovering a scene that looked more like a business meeting than an emotional breakdown. Rick looked up calmly as Vasquez entered, gesturing to an empty chair. "Dr. Vasquez, right on time. Please sit down. We have several important matters to discuss." The formal tone and controlled environment disoriented Vasquez, who had expected to find chaos and panic. Instead, he faced a man who appeared completely in control of the situation, suggesting resources and capabilities that made resistance futile. "What do you want?" Vasquez asked, unconsciously echoing Tricia's earlier question. Rick's answer would define the rest of their lives. "I want you to understand that your war against my family has been lost, and now you're going to live with the consequences of defeat." Chapter 8: Total Destruction. The confrontation in Rick's living room lasted less than 30 minutes, but its effects would reverberate through the conspirators' lives forever. Rick had orchestrated the meeting not to negotiate or seek reconciliation, but to demonstrate the complete futility of any resistance to his plans. "Let me explain your current situation," Rick began, opening the first file folder with methodical precision. "Dr. Vasquez, your medical license will be permanently revoked within 60 days. The evidence of your unlicensed procedures, insurance fraud, and patient endangerment is already in the hands of the state medical board. No hospital in the United States will employ you." Vasquez started to protest, but Rick continued without pause. "Your ex-wife's attorney has received documentation of assets you hid during your divorce proceedings. You're facing perjury charges and additional alimony obligations that will consume any remaining financial resources. The private clinic where you performed unlicensed procedures has been reported to federal authorities for tax evasion." Turning to Tricia, Rick's tone remained conversationally calm. "Your employment at Desert Ridge Medical Center ended yesterday. The administration received evidence that you've been sharing confidential patient information with unauthorized individuals and falsifying time records to cover personal absences. You're also being investigated for medical identity theft." Tricia's face went ashen. "That's impossible. I never shared patient information." "You shared details about wealthy patients' medical conditions with Dr. Vasquez, information he used to target them for his unlicensed cosmetic procedures. The evidence trail is quite extensive." Rick opened another folder. "You're also facing criminal charges for embezzlement from our joint accounts. The credit cards you opened in both our names constitute identity theft under federal law." Rick paused to let the information sink in before delivering the most devastating blow. "Neither of you will have custody of or visitation rights with Ashley and Emma. Dr. Vasquez has no legal standing as a non-adoptive biological father, especially given his impending criminal conviction. Trisha's fraud charges and evidence of emotional manipulation of the children will result in supervised visitation at best. Vasquez finally found his voice. You can't control what happens to my biological children. Rick's smile was genuinely amused. Watch me. I have documentation proving that you've been coaching Ashley and Emma to view me as a temporary figure in their lives, while positioning yourself as their real father. Courts consider that emotional abuse of children. Add your criminal conviction and financial instability, and you become exactly the kind of person family courts are designed to protect children from. The psychological warfare continued as Rick revealed the scope of his campaign against their support networks. Vasquez's colleagues in the medical community had received anonymous warnings about his unprofessional conduct. Trisha's friends and social circle had been provided with evidence of her deception and embezzlement. Both of them faced social isolation in addition to their legal and financial troubles. My family already learned their lessons, Rick continued, opening a final folder. Mike is facing 15 months in federal prison for tax evasion. Frank lost his disability benefits and is being prosecuted for fraud. Linda's embezzlement from veteran charities made national news. She's facing felony charges and complete social disgrace. Rick leaned forward, his demeanor shifting from conversational to predatory. Each of them tried to contact me for help, not understanding that I was the source of their problems. Family loyalty, they called it. The same loyalty they showed me while mocking my ignorance about my wife's affair. The room fell silent as the conspirators absorbed the magnitude of their situation. Rick had systematically destroyed every aspect of their lives with professional thoroughness, leaving them without resources, support, or hope for recovery. Vasquez made one final attempt at negotiation. What do you want in exchange for stopping this? Money? I can find a way to pay you back for whatever financial damage we've caused. Rick's laughter was genuinely delighted. You still don't understand. This isn't about money or compensation. This is about consequences. You declared war on my family, and I'm ensuring that you never have the resources or opportunity to threaten anyone else's life again. Trisha broke down completely, sobbing as she realized the hopelessness of her situation. Please, Rick. I made mistakes, but don't punish the girls for my failures. They need their mother. The girls need stability and honesty, Rick replied without sympathy. They need a parent who doesn't lie to them about their identity or coach them to abandon the people who love them. I'm going to provide them with exactly the kind of family environment you and Dr. Vasquez tried to destroy. Rick stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. You both have 48 hours to leave Phoenix permanently. Dr. Vasquez, your lease has been terminated and your belongings will be placed in storage. Trisha, you can pack whatever personal items you can carry, but everything else remains here for the girls' stability. Where are we supposed to go? Trisha asked desperately. That's not my problem to solve, Rick replied with chilling indifference. You're adults who made adult decisions. Figure out how to live with the consequences. As Vasquez and Trisha left the house together for the last time, Rick felt the deep satisfaction of a successful military operation. Every objective had been achieved with minimal collateral damage to the truly innocent parties, his daughters. The enemy had been neutralized completely, leaving him in uncontested control of the battlefield. The next morning, Rick began the process of rebuilding his family structure around the truth rather than deception. Ashley and Emma would learn about their biological parentage, but they would learn it in a context that emphasized Rick's consistent love and protection compared to the adults who had manipulated and abandoned them. His revenge was complete, but more importantly, his family was finally free from the cancer of betrayal that had infected it for 6 years. The people who had stolen his life were now facing consequences that would last the rest of their lives, while Rick emerged stronger and more successful than ever. Justice, Rick reflected, was sometimes more satisfying than forgiveness ever could have been. Chapter 9. New Foundations. 6 months after the confrontation, Rick sat in his home office reviewing financial reports from his security consulting firm. The business had expanded significantly during his revenge campaign, as if his focused energy and strategic thinking had sharpened his professional capabilities. New contracts with high-profile clients had increased the company's value by 40%, money that would secure Ashley and Emma's futures regardless of any legal challenges. The girls had adapted to their new reality with remarkable resilience. Rick had told them the truth about their biological parentage in carefully planned conversations, emphasizing that DNA didn't determine love or commitment. He'd explained that their mother had made mistakes that hurt the family, and that Dr. Vasquez had never been the caring figure he pretended to be. "Does this mean we're not really your daughters?" Emma had asked during their first difficult conversation. "You're my daughters in every way that matters," Rick had replied, holding both girls as they processed the information. "I've been your father since the day you were born. That doesn't change because of what some adults did wrong." Ashley, typically more direct than her sister, had asked the question Rick had been dreading. "Where's Mommy now?" "Your mother is dealing with some serious problems she created," Rick explained honestly. "She's not in a place where she can take care of you right now. But I'm here, and I always will be." The transition hadn't been without challenges. Both girls experienced periods of confusion and anger as they understood the scope of the deception that had shaped their early lives. But Rick's consistent presence and emotional stability provided the anchor they needed during the adjustment period. Professional counseling helped them process the complex emotions surrounding their mother's absence and the revelation about their biological father. The therapist, Dr. Sarah Chun, helped Rick understand how to provide appropriate support without demonizing the adults who had betrayed them. Children need to believe that the adults in their lives acted from understandable motivations, even when those actions were wrong, Dr. Chun explained during one of their sessions. "Your daughters need to understand that their mother made mistakes without believing that she never loved them." Rick had followed this guidance, explaining Trisha's actions as poor choices made by someone who was confused about what she wanted rather than as deliberate cruelty. It was a more generous interpretation than his personal feelings allowed, but he recognized its importance for his daughter's psychological health. The legal aftermath had unfolded exactly as Rick predicted. Trisha's embezzlement charges resulted in a plea agreement that included restitution payments and supervised probation. She'd found employment as a medical assistant in a clinic in Tucson, earning a fraction of her previous income and living in a small apartment that barely accommodated basic needs. Dr. Vasquez's fall had been even more dramatic. His medical license revocation ended any possibility of continuing his career, and the criminal charges for insurance fraud resulted in 18 months in federal prison. His ex-wife's successful lawsuit for hidden assets left him financially ruined even after his sentence was completed. Rick's family members had faced their own consequences with varying degrees of grace. Mike had served his time in minimum security prison and emerged to find his motorcycle repair business permanently closed and his reputation in their community destroyed. Frank's fraud conviction resulted in a suspended sentence, but permanent loss of benefits and social standing. Linda's embezzlement charges led to community service and restitution payments that would continue for years. None of them had contacted Rick since learning the truth about their own destruction. They understood that their former family member had become an enemy who possessed capabilities they couldn't match or resist. The fear of additional retaliation kept them distant and submissive. Ashley and Emma had started showing interest in their actual heritage as they processed the truth about their parentage. Rick encouraged this exploration while ensuring it didn't become romanticized longing for absent parents. They studied Italian language and culture as academic subjects rather than expressions of loyalty to Dr. Vasquez. "We're learning about where part of our genetics came from," Rick explained when neighbors asked about the girls' newfound interest in Italian customs. "But genetics don't determine identity. We're building our own family traditions." The financial security Rick had established through his business restructuring allowed him to provide opportunities that neither Trisha nor Vasquez could have offered. Private schools, travel opportunities, and enrichment programs gave Ashley and Emma advantages that transcended their complex parentage situation. Rick had also begun dating again, carefully vetting potential partners to ensure they understood his daughter's complex family history and his own protective instincts. He'd learned that his capacity for trust hadn't been destroyed by betrayal, but it now required evidence and time to develop. Dr. Chun had helped him understand that his response to the betrayal, while extreme, had been psychologically healthy in its own way. You refuse to accept a reality built